Hi, my name is Kafui Dey. What would make a man leave America after being wrongly arrested, renounce the country of his birth, and move over to Ghana, where he's now a chief, a scholar, and a voice for African rebirth? We'll find out who he is in a moment, but enough time to just let you know that if you haven't yet subscribed, and I've seen the back end, we have only 15% of you watching who are also subscribers. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, and then you get the content when it arrives. My guest is Ɔbenfo Ọbádélé Bakari Kambon, a professor at the University of Ghana, currently on sabbatical. Good to have you on the show.
Good to be here.
How have you been spending your sabbatical? I understand you traveled.
Yeah, I did travel. I'm just coming back from Burkina Faso. I spent a week there. My mother and wife and oldest daughter spent 2 weeks there. We got a chance to have an audience with President Ibrahim Traoré. We got a chance to check out the various industries that they have going on there. For example, they have cell phones that they're making in Burkina Faso. This happens to be a Burkina Faso phone. And we'll be going again in December as part of the Sankofa journey. This is actually our 27th annual Sankofa journey. For those who are interested, sankofajourney.com. There are a lot of copycats who are trying to use the same name, so don't go anywhere else other than sankofajourney.com. But yeah, we've already told people ahead of time, when you come, get ready to buy a Burkina Faso phone. They have laptops that they're making there, i5, i7, i9 laptops. They have electric vehicles that they're making there. We're not going to force anyone to buy the electric vehicle because that's a lot of cash, but at least people can support the industries. You know, a lot of people, you know, when they say Burkina Faso, they're saying the land of upright people. So these are people who are not, you know, or beggars or whatever. They're going to give you something of value for your money. So they would rather, you know, produce something that, you know, you can use, that, you know, you would love and so forth. So, you know, just being there was a blacktastic experience. Like I said, I spent the majority of my time, you know, scouting out the different places that we'll stay at when we're there in December. At the BB2Me conference that's happening from the 12th to the 14th, you are keynote speaker for the last one. One thing that we're going to do, so we always have an art exhibition and an art auction, but as part of the art exhibition this year, we're unveiling a huge mural of President Ibrahim Traoré, 15 feet by 8 feet. It's like, you know, the size of this wall, basically. And it's showing President Ibrahim Traoré backed up by the ancestors, right? So it should be very powerful. Of course, Nana Tama Sankara among them. But we want to unveil it at the conference here, and then we're going to transport it up to Burkina Faso. So I got a chance to speak with Mr. Herman Tue. He's the Secretary General of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs there. He said he's going to pass it to the Chief of Staff and, you know, see if we can make that happen. But yeah, very amazing stuff that we have going on.
What was Ouagadougou like?
So my first time going to Ouagadougou was 25 years ago, actually. I was here at University of Ghana for study abroad, and we decided that between December and January, myself and two other brothers who I went to undergrad with, that we were going to Burkina Faso, and then Mali, and then eventually go over to Senegal. We got to Mali, we didn't get to Senegal because one of them fell ill, and we said, you know what, let's go back to Ghana. We don't want to chance it. But when my first impression of Ouagadougou, there were a couple of things. One that struck me was that everyone is on moto, right? Everyone, you'll see the women decked out, you know, they have the head wraps, they have their full, you know, amazing clothes on. And, you know, Burkina has some of the finest cotton in the entire world. So they're decked out, you know, looking beautiful, and they're all on moto, right?
Like Northern Ghana.
It's like Northern Ghana. When you go to Northern Ghana, if you see a car, take a picture because you may not see another one for the rest of the day. It's motorbikes. And you'll go to the places where they're parked, and they're like hundreds of motorbikes. And it's like, they can probably check and see, okay, if you don't know how to ride a motorbike, you're not Burkinabe, we'll deport you. We know that you're not really a citizen.
No skills.
Because you have to be a motorbike rider. You know, if you don't have a motorbike, maybe you're on a bicycle, but it's like 100% coverage area. Everybody in Burkina, like that's a defining feature. So that was one thing that struck me at that time, and it's still the same way, right? Another thing that struck me at that time was it was so smoky. Like I remember going to the Grand Marché, like the Central Market, and you know, you have the smoke from the exhaust. This is 2020, 2021. My first time, 2000 to 2001. And, you know, you had the exhaust from, you know, from the vehicles, plus the exhaust from the moto. You had some people who were smoking. You had others who were, you know, roasting meat on the side. It was just like such a smoky atmosphere. It's not like that anymore, right?
What's it like now?
So, you know, it's a bit clearer, like even inside the, you know, city center. And when I was there, I went in August as well, this year, August. And, you know, I heard something, I was there for a business summit, and they said over 80% of Burkina Faso are farmers. I was like, wow, that sounds a bit high. Then we went out to like Tinkodogo, and you go to the countryside, and there's a farm on both sides of the road as far as the eye can see.
Everybody's farming.
Everybody's farming. Then I was like, wow, 80% may even be low. Like, how can you have a whole population? But, you know, if you talk about self-sufficiency, and, you know, when I was there, I got a chance to taste some of the food. They have a food that's, it's a bit like tumbani, it's a bit like moi moi. They call it ganre. That's probably one of my favorite foods that I tasted while I was there. They also have samsa, and that one is like, you know, akara. It's like gosi.
Yeah, beans, yeah.
The fried bean fritter. So you'll find a lot of similarities between the foods of the north of Ghana and then what you have there. And then they speak a language that's very similar. So if you speak Grone, if you even speak Dagare, Dagbani, you'll find flavors of it to the point where you can say an entire sentence in one language and it's like the same across the board. Just, you know, really to the point that, you know, we're one people ultimately. So, you know, there were a lot of things that really struck me. One of the main things is that everywhere you go, things are being built. And that's whether you're talking about road construction, whether you're talking about, you know, buildings being constructed, whether you're talking about, like I said, the cell phones, the laptops that they're building there, whether you're talking about the EV. We got a chance to go to the showroom for
electric vehicles. Okay.
Electric vehicles. And, you know, oftentimes, you know, what I've thought about Ghana is, wow, where is the infrastructure for something like that? But you'll go there, you'll see charging stations around, you know, Ouagadougou, so people can do that. And they also have basically like Okada, but it's electric motorbikes.
Motorbikes, taxis.
So, yeah, basically, and it's, you know, they're able to charge and do their rounds. So I was really impressed by a lot that's going on there. In the news, you hear, oh, things are so unstable, so forth. And, you know, what you see as people are going about their daily lives. You have, you know, I'm sure certain sections of the country, mainly at the borders, we have these, you know, so-called jihadists and whatnot. But, you know, you have to applaud President Ibrahim Traoré for being able to establish enough stability where, like I said, people are just going around, you know, their day-to-day lives. There was just a group there that had, you know, hundreds of people, and everybody felt safe. And then even on top of that, they'll make sure you're safe because they'll give you an escort, police, you know, it's like, you know, we're making sure that things are, you know, locked down. And that was even the idea when President Ibrahim Traoré took power, is that, you know, we have to ensure stability. And when you come across like the different decrees and laws that are being made, very, very progressive stuff, really in alignment with Nana Thomas Sankara. And, you know, one thing that also came out was they had a delegation. You know, you talk about stability and growth in places like Rwanda. Our guide who was there, he said, wow, you know, we had a delegation that went, like after the revolution, that went from Burkina Faso to Rwanda. And they said, yeah, we want to see how you all are doing and so forth. And what they were told was, what we're doing is we're following the plans of Nana Thomas Sankara from Burkina Faso. They were like, wow.
Full circle.
Full circle. So it's like, you know, you don't have to go far.
No.
Because a lot of these ideas from the Great Green Wall, when I was there in August, I got a chance to plant a baobab tree and another tree. They said this is a tree of AES, like this baobab, standing strong. So, you know, they are actually implementing things to the point where even though that's further north than Ghana, you know, I've been to places like Tamale, I've been to places like Wa, so forth. It's greener there than it is here because they're intentional about greening and, you know, moving forward with intentionally planting trees, creating microclimates where, because the trees, you know, will expel a bit of moisture into the air, what that's going to do is create more clouds, and then it, you know, starts to be a self-generating ecosystem. Exactly. So a lot of things really struck me about being there, but mainly the leadership, but not just the leadership, the followership. People always say, oh, our problem is the leaders. I said, the problem isn't only leaders, the problem is the followers. You know, the difference between leaders and followers is one of opportunity. Everybody wants to be in a V8, everybody wants to be in a 4x4. So if you take that leader out and then put any random person on the street, he's gonna do the same thing. He's gonna import a V8, he's gonna import a 4x4, he's gonna do all the same things, suit and tie. So it's really, you know, a question of a change in values, that's when you have an actual change, because the leaders aren't dropping down from, you know, space somewhere. They're pulled from the exact same people. But the issues, amongst other things, is that, you know, you have people who have been trained to hate themselves. And you'll find that in terms of the skin bleaching, you'll find that in terms of the perms, you'll find that in terms of the clothes, you'll find that in terms of the language that's being spoken. You know, you'll go around and people, like I've been here for 17 years in Ghana, And when my children are out, people start greeting them like how they greet their own children. Good morning, good afternoon. I said, Omuchichi. Oh, Omuchichi. Hey, Machi. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hey.
Surprised.
But it's surprising. You know, I had one situation where when I was living at Hacho, that there were children who didn't even know how to recognize their own mother's language. So the mother spoke Ewe, the father spoke Chi, and I would greet them in Ewe, Ndinami. Like all of the regular things. And they know that I speak Chi to my children. So they were just like, we don't speak Chi, or we don't understand Chi. And I'm like, not even to not speak your mother tongue, but to not even be able to recognize it whatsoever. I was like, let me give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe my Ewe isn't great, but nah, you still got to be able to recognize.
A lot going on there.
Yeah, there's something going on with that. But
so Burkina was good.
Burkina was great, and I got a chance to learn Maori as well.
Okay.
So Niya Biogo is what you would say at this time. Zakaramba is asking about the family. Kambafan asking about the children. Yichibare actually learned that 25 years ago. But you know, all of these things. And I was interviewed on one of the most popular programs at Radio Television Burkina. And I got an ovation from the people because of my Maori, right? I was able to produce a speech.
Connected them.
Yeah.
What was their leader like, President Traoré?
He was very calm and very measured yet charismatic. Like when he spoke, he's not, sis, boom, but you know, you have some leaders who are just really, I guess, energetic in their presentation but he spoke with force, he spoke with authority, but a certain measure of calmness that you would get from somebody who I would suppose knows that they're doing what's right, that know that what they're doing is supported by their people, supported by their ancestors and their descendants who are really one and the same. So, you know, those were the things. He has a very stately, presence about him. But, you know, when you encounter him, the first thing that strikes you is that this is a man of substance, right? You have some people. And when I went there in August, I asked everybody who I came across, what do you think of, President Ibrahim Traoré? And I did that because back in around, I think, 2015, I went to Umzansi, what they call South Africa. And at that time, Julius Malema was just, getting popular. So even from the airport, I was like, let me find out, because he was saying great stuff and so forth. But from the airport, I asked, well, what do you all think about Julius Malema? And the people who I asked, they were like, oh, he's just like the rest of them. He has, these cars and houses all around. He's like the ANC, blah, blah, blah. And I was surprised. I was like, all around the world, people are saying this is a freedom fighter and economic freedom. But I was surprised that literally every single person had something along those lines. Nobody was like unreservedly, he's great, he's our future leader, and blah, blah, blah. So I wanted to juxtapose, because you'll hear things on the news, but I was like, well, what do the people on the ground say about President Ibrahim Traoré? In Burkina.
What were they saying?
They were saying that this is the first time that they see hope. They had Blaise Compaoré for 27 years, however long. They said that they see a future for themselves and for Burkina, so that's why they contribute to the Patriotic Fund. That's why they go out there and build sidewalks. That's why they do all these.
What's the Patriotic Fund?
So this is basically a fund, a national fund that anybody can contribute to voluntarily in order to do all of those construction projects, the work that's going on, that you can be a part of that, you can contribute. You'll see like entire articulated trucks, as they call them here, like the long flatbeds filled with nothing but cement that's been donated, contributed to be able to, like I said, do sidewalks, do, the construction works, public works, right? And then on top of that, people who don't necessarily have the money to do that, they donate their labor. So while we're out there, they have Faso Mabo, which is Faso construction. Faso being the homeland, that's where Burkina Faso comes from. But Faso Mabo is talking about, the construction of the homeland.
Building the homeland.
Building the homeland. So people are out there, and literally they're out there putting down the pavement, blocks for the sidewalks. They're out there, mixing cement. They're out there, doing pillars and columns and everything that you can imagine. So very can-do. Very can-do mentality. And it's really interesting to juxtapose like that type of can-do mentality to, other places that don't necessarily have that. You have people who are, they graduate from the university and they're like, where's my job? As opposed to what am I going to create? How am I going to create my own cell phones? Or if you don't have the money to do that, you can work at a cell phone factory that's been made by your own people. Now, one thing that I asked when I bought the cell phone, I asked my translator, Amadou, I was like, well, how well patronized are the cell phones? He was like, oh, everybody knows about it. And I was like, well, how well patronized are they?
It's one thing to know.
Exactly. And he said, they're not as well patronized. People know about it. And I said, well, it reminds me of Kantanka because, I'll drive in Kantanka. I have people who I assist in repatriating, and I'll drive all the way from, Equipment Mampong, where I am now, to Accra. They're like, your Kantanka is the only Kantanka I see on the road. And I always tell them that this isn't in a vacuum. The fact that people would prefer cars made by non-blacks over cars made by black people is just the same thing as how they want to bleach their skin, which is just the same thing about the language issue that I brought up, which is just the same thing about, all across the board. If you've grown up your entire life praying to an imaginary white man, that's going to have an impact across the board. If you go through school where if you speak your mother tongue, they'll put a sign around your neck that says something like, I'm dumb, I'm an idiot, no vernacular, or others have told me they put like a snail shell to say that you're slow, or a tortoise shell, all types of, this is like abuse. It's psychological abuse that actually tells them that their own languages are inferior. So you have to go to the English, you have to, do this type of thing. Another thing that struck me, which is, I guess, similar, like anyone I would greet them in More, and they were shocked. When they're greeting each other, bonjour, bonsoir, bonjour. And that's just like Ghana.
Yeah.
So, I see some very progressive things going on in the society, but at the same time, I can see that there are a lot of vestiges similar to, what you find in Ghana. There aren't a lot of people who are like, I refuse to drive a car made by, non-black people. There are a few people who say, like, when the time I changed phones was RLG, right? I've never used a non-black cell phone ever since that time. So that should tell you, because RLG went under some time ago.
A long time ago, yeah.
And I said I will never use a phone made by non-black people again. I don't care, iPhone, Samsung, any of those. I don't want any of those. So from there, then I switched to Mara, which is out of Rwanda. And then from there, I switched to Burkina. There aren't too many people.
The Hope one is called Hope, right?
Yeah, this is called Hope by Horizon, is the name of the company. There aren't too many people who practice what Nana John Henrik Clark, a noted historian, will call the essential selfishness of survival. The essential selfishness of survival, which is what you'll find the Chinese doing. Like back in the 80s, Japan was out there. They had Sony. They had all these, major brands. The Chinese remembered the start of, so-called World War II was Japan invading China and the rape of Nanking, or Nanjing as is referred to. And they said, we don't want what's nice, we want what's ours, right? And they stayed on that same thing. They went from their only export being kung fu movies, cheap kung fu movies with a flying through the air, all of those, to now you can't find anything that doesn't have made in China on it, right? And what you see is that, you have to start somewhere. Some people say, oh, well, Kantanka's only assembling, so I don't want to. I'm like, this is a cop-out. You have to start somewhere. The Chinese at one point were only assembling. They would take a photo of it, they'd get it, they'd understand how it works before you can start manufacturing. How do you expect them to get to the point? And then, the same thing for the Korean brands, Kia, Hyundai. They were, given subsidies, they were given protectionism, up to the point that they got to export quality, and now they're able to stand on their own 2 feet. These are the types of things that you can see here. And as a matter of fact, they're doing something similar to that with the subsidies from Horizon that does the laptops and the phones. They said that the government entities, they have to buy those.
Great stuff.
And 80% of the workers there are women. And they said, yeah, the women are so much better. They have a certain gentleness with how they put the components together, attention to detail. And, it's just, a lot of really amazing things going on in Burkina.
So start from where you are. And that segues nicely to you. So I want us to start from the very beginning. What is the earliest memory you have of your life?
The earliest memory that I have of my life was probably, so I was born in Brooklyn, but I only lived there for 1 year. My parents really, my birth is what spurred them on. In New York, you had a lot of what were referred to as freedom schools, like Uhuru Sasa. Matter of fact, we have the Abibi Fahundia Film Festival, and one of the films we're screening is The Sun Rises in the East, which is talking about the organization that was there in Brooklyn called The East, where my older sister went to, Uhuru Sasa, that translates to Freedom Now. And you had a lot of, the youth, the children of the 60s and 70s who've never had non-black names, right? Like myself, right? People say, oh, when did you change your name? I said, I never changed my name.
So you were named?
Ọbádélé Bakari Kambon. And, people say, when did you change your name? And I say, what that lets me know is that we don't have a lot of conversation, because there are so many people who are like me who've never had a non-black name, who were born and raised in the US. And people are shocked when they come to places like Ghana, and they'll find out here's somebody who's calling themselves Harry Sawyer or Arian Simpson. They've never had a black name on the other side.
So the reverse.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's like, what happened there is real, what happened here is real, but we don't have those conversations. So people are always shocked when they come here and they see Ghanaians are all wearing clothes made by non-black people. They're all, I can go down the list. I've already mentioned some of the things. They're bleaching their skin. You got billboards. They got the, perm and the imported, this thing, all of those types of things. People are shocked, like, how can this be a black country and that's what they're doing? And I'm like, well, what that tells me is that you don't know a lot about what they refer to as colonialism. I call it isfet, which means chaos, right? That's a term from classical Kemet. But, with that, that's where you have people who are essentially being enslaved in their own countries. I have one of my students, PhD students in African Studies, who's dealing with forced conscription in mines. Very similar thing. You're not getting paid. If you don't do it, you get killed. Yeah. The traditional ruler will be, killed or conscripted himself. Like, these are the types of things that go on, and those have had long-lasting effects. Now, for me, like I said, North Carolina, I remember my parents, they could have stayed in New York, where you can go to 1,000 lectures about how we have to be self-sufficient, how we have to do for self, how we want freedom now. Like, literally, there are so many people who are saying that, but if you're in New York, there's nobody who can actually do that. You're dependent on the subway. You're dependent on municipal water. You're dependent on, the grocery stores. You're dependent on, paying your light bill on time. You're dependent on, water. All of those types of things you're entirely dependent on. So what you can do, the best you can do is advocate for how we all need to do such and such, but you actually can't practice it. My parents, and that's the theme for the Abibi to Me conference for this year, and that's December 12th through the 14th, right here at Equipe Mampon. Our theme is what Black Power is. Demonstration over conversation, right?
So do not just talk.
Be about what you say that you're about is essentially what it is in a nutshell. So they moved to North Carolina. They built their own log cabin in the woods over the course of 18 months, out there with chainsaws, cutting the logs, laying them on top of each other, driving the spikes in, putting caulk in between, putting in the windows, doing everything themselves. Not like they had contractors, like literally my parents, these city slickers. My father was born in Brooklyn. My mother was born in Harlem. But they decided that they wanted to actually be about what they said that they were about.
What was their professions? What was your father's?
So my father has a doctorate in education. So he was a professor at the university, much like myself. And then my mother also has a doctorate in psychology. So she's a past president of the Association of Black Psychologists. When she was president, they actually brought 500 psychologists here to Ghana to have their international convention. And she first started coming to Ghana in 1972, and then she first brought me in 1998 on the very first Sankofa journey, like I said, 27 years ago. So, these are, the things that when you see your parents actually doing, when you see them actually being about what they say that they're about, that really, and their plan was to move to the South, which is where my mother's side of the family had been enslaved, and then to move to the Caribbean, which is where my father's side had been enslaved in Barbados and St. Kitts, and then move from there back to the continent. And they didn't know necessarily where on the continent, but having come to Ghana permanently in 2008, I've been here 17 years now, it was basically everything coming full circle, what their original plans were. And you mentioned like the wrongful arrest, like that's a part of my story. But one thing that gets missing is that, like, I grew up, I never stood up for the national anthem. Like, people.
Even when you were.
Even when I was a child, like in kindergarten, everybody else is standing up. I said, we don't stand up for that.
Did your parents stand up for it?
No. That's where I got it from.
Yes. And then what would be the reaction? I mean,
they would just be like dumbfounded, like, what do you mean? I don't celebrate the holidays, so everybody else is celebrating Christmas. Because again, we came out of that freedom movement of the 60s and 70s, and people know kind of abstractly like there was a Black Power movement, but they forget the children of that movement, you understand? And we had real lives as well, but I never hear anybody talk about that side of things, is that we grew up understanding that America is the enemy of Black people. So, for me to move to Ghana, it wasn't, I could say maybe the straw that broke the camel's back, but I had already been here 2000, 2001 for an entire year of study abroad, and that was part of my decision-making process. I wanted to go to a place where I spoke the language, of course, fluently. So Ghana was one. I speak Yoruba. I teach that also at the university level fluently, so I was considering Nigeria. I was considering the University of Sekontagyo because I wanted to finish my PhD. And I wanted to do it here on the continent. I was considering Dar es Salaam because I studied Kiswahili as well. So, just various places, but really my decision for Ghana was because I knew some of the professors from my time here at that year of study abroad. And it seemed like, a very good fit in terms of the linguistics program.
Let's take it back a bit. Did people think you were weird because you're not standing up for the anthem? Did you get into trouble?
No. So one thing about my father, I mentioned that he was a doctor of education at one of these, so-called Ivy League schools. And he taught at a HBCU. So all of his students, historically black college and / or university.
Okay.
So what he would do is, because he's teaching the teachers, he would actually place his students who have to go through like basically an apprenticeship type of period, he would place them at the schools that we were, right? He selected a school where the principal was black, right?
Okay, right.
One of the gifted and talented, what later became known as AP, Advanced Placement Schools. So we didn't have problems with that. They already knew that we're not down with the okie doke, right? We don't celebrate the horror days, as we called them. We don't stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. We don't recite any of those things, that those are the anthems of the enemies of black people, you understand? So we came up with that understanding. We would rather come in and tell people, teach them about Kwanza. We would teach them about the Nguzo Saba, like those types of things.
Explain Kwanza to somebody who is hearing for the first time.
So Kwanza is coming from the Kiswahili word, which is referred to like the first. It's talking about the first fruits of the harvest. What we do here in Ghana, we actually just celebrated the harvest festival here in Ekwapemampo on the Ojira and Ohum festivals. Yeah. But basically, what we have done ever since we invented the concept of time as black people is that the new year always starts at the time of the harvest, right? It means that the end is the beginning and the beginning is the end.
Like Homowo.
It's just like Homowo, it's just like Hobichocho, it's just like all of the festivals that you find throughout the entire continent, you have these harvest festivals. Now, with Kwanza, as is practiced in the US, it was kind of like a replacement for quote unquote Christmas. So they put it way outside of the harvest. So they have like the concept of harvest, but they put it at a time where there's no real harvest going on. But yeah, basically there were certain principles like Umoja, Kujichagulia, Ujima, Ujamaa, referring to unity, self-determination, collective work and responsibility, cooperative economics, and the whole nine. So, or the whole 7 actually of the principles. So these were the types of things that we grew up with. And then on top of that, my parents, because they actually wanted to be about what they said that they're about, they dug their own well, right? So that means they're not dependent on the municipal water system like they would have been if they were in New York. They, grew their own food. So we grew up, one of my earliest memories is we had like 2x4s to demarcate the garden, right? So that's where we're growing our own food.
What were you growing? What kind of crops?
Oh, just everything you can imagine, like, some of the things that you can get on the side of the road here, like the cabbage and carrots and, things along those lines. Okay. Yeah. I remember corn, we shucked corn so these are city slickers, mind you, right? They go to see, but we're out there shucking the corn and so forth. Yeah. So I remember all of those things, snapping the peas, those are the beans and so forth. So I remember all of those things. And then, I remember growing up in that log cabin in the woods. We had like 4 dogs at a time. And we could just run around and be free. And that's what I wanted for my children. Because if you look here, we have a similar type of set. We're entirely on solar. So no ECG. There are no poles that even come out here. On top of that, we have our own rainwater catchment system, our own solar borehole. So basically the idea of self-sufficiency was transmitted through observation, right, and participation, that they're not, giving lectures about how, all black people need to do such and such, and they're not doing it.
They're living it.
They're living it, right? And that is something that has really been inculcated into me, is that I don't want to be one of these, orators who's pronounced themselves keynote speaker for life, but there's no substance to what they're doing. They're just taking people's money, chasing after women, and all types of, vices that people who haven't read anything. And the point I always make is, if the person who's read 1,000 books is doing the exact same thing as the one who's read 0 books, then what's the point of your 1,000 books?
No difference.
There's no difference. Yeah. So anything that you learn, there should be some type of behavioral correlate. So back in the 90s, like 98, 99, I decided that every day of my life, I'm going to wear clothes made by black people, every single day. To the point where I remember I was doing my PhD, and I would just, get up, I would even have my drawers made by black people. I would get up and I was like, the day's about to end. Let me make sure I put on something. Right?
You fulfill the pledge.
Exactly, so I could fulfill the pledge. When I had this run-in in Chicago, this false arrest and so forth, that we beat that case, I remember sitting there in the, booking where they, write down your name, fingerprints, all that. And one of my major concerns, I should say, was that if I get put in jail, I'll have to wear those jumpsuits, and that's not made by black people. No. So this isn't something that I guess other people would think about, but I'm like, I said in 98, every day of my life, I'm only wearing clothes made by black people. Part of my pledge of economic warfare against our enemies. It's one thing to know that these are our enemies, But how can you then turn around and finance those exact same enemies? And everybody who is there in the US, whether they like it or not, every time they pay their mortgage, they're literally building the prison that's going to lock up their nephew. Every single time they pay their car note, they're literally buying the bullets that are going to shoot their little cousin down in the street. Like literally, we're financing our oppression. We're financing our enemies. But once you repatriate, you're able to bring that down to minimum, all the way down possibly to zero, depending on your degree of, pulling away from that. So I gave a talk some years ago called Divest from America, Invest in Africa to Make Africa Great Again. And, that was basically the idea, is that they had this African Studies Association of Africa, and they said, we want to host a conference in DC. And I was like, well, DC is stolen land, right? That doesn't belong to the ones who are there. And what's ironic, they'll have something they'll call a Department of Justice, and the Department of Justice itself is sitting on land that was stolen.
Injustice.
Being built by people who were stolen, right? So there's a line from a song that I like by United Front, where it says, treated like a thief, talking about our situation as black people. He says, treated like a thief on stolen land, a descendant of stolen woman and stolen man. I was like, that really encapsulates our experience as black people. Where they'll say, y'all are all criminals. I'm like, you literally stole us, right?
Exactly. So what are you talking about?
What are you talking about? Every single person who got kidnapped, people say, they want to say, there was a sale. There's nobody who went voluntarily. Every single person who went through enslavement, every last one got kidnapped. And usually they got kidnapped by someone who thought that they're different. I'm Asante, y'all are Eve. Or y'all are Dahome. I'm this, y'all are that. And what the enslavers, the real puppet masters are doing, they say, y'all all look like the same thing to me.
So we're taking you all go.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you have this in Old Calabar and New Calabar, where you had,
in Nigeria.
Yeah, in Nigeria, you had those who thought that, these are our trading partners. Well, guess what? They invited these people who they thought, these are our white, quote unquote, trading partners. And they said, come on, we're going to give you drinks and so forth. It was the Robin Johns. For anyone who's interested, you can look it up. Ephraim, Robin John, and so forth. And they were invited onto the ship. And then as soon as they got on the ship, they put out the guns and said, you thought you were our trading partners? So no matter who they were, they might have thought that they were trading partners. They may have thought that, these are my partners, and kidnapping those people over there who I think are my enemies. But at the end of the day, didn't they turn around on Dahome, the French on Dahome? Then they turn around on Asante, the British on Asante. Every single group, and this actually started in 1441, where you had Antal Gonzalez, who he was sent by Prince Henry the Navigator, and it was to go and get seal skins and oil and other things. And you can read a book by Professor Nafafe that goes into Lorenzo da Silva de Mendoza, where he actually wrote down how he had the idea of what we now know as transatlantic enslavement, and he kidnapped a black man and a black woman. That's the start of what we know. You have another guy named Silva in Luanda who got the idea of, it's so much heavy lifting for us as quote unquote white people to have to kidnap everybody. How can we get them to turn against other black people? And what he came up with is that all the way from ancient times, you would have, if someone is able to defeat you militarily, you have to pay a tribute, right? And what he said is that the tributes that you've been making up to this point, we're no longer going to accept them. You've been bringing fowls, you've been bringing palm oil, you've been bringing wood, you've been bringing all these things. From henceforth, and this is, from 1400s all the way up to the 1500s, he says, from henceforth, you have to bring your tribute in other black people.
So,
and then they would give terms where they know that that person themselves can't fulfill those terms. You have 48 hours to bring me 1,000 black people. And they know that you can't do it, but they know that they have the guns, they know that they have the cannons, so they use that as a pretense in order to go and enslave those people who they, made that demand on, where they emptied the entire land of every single person, including the traditional ruler, right? This is why Mendoza went to the Vatican. This is a traditional ruler. He went to the Vatican to lodge a court case against the Vatican, saying that they're the ones who passed the papal bull called Dum Diversis, and another one called Romanus Pontifex, that said that all of these infidels, heathens, savages, referring to us as black people, should be reduced to perpetual slavery. Perpetual. Like that wasn't even an idea, like your children's children, your great, however many great grandchildren, all of them are going to be enslaved forever. Like that wasn't even anybody's idea up to that, point in time. It was like an innovation. But he's the one who came up, this guy Silva is the one who came up with this idea of, you know what, we're going to enslave everybody. The ones who helped us build a fort, we're enslaving them too. The ones who converted to Christianity, we're enslaving them too. If you're black, you're getting, so he was able to, he wanted to end all of enslavement, but what ended up happening is he at least got those who were, taken under those false pretenses to Brazil. He got them, brought back to what's now modern day Angola. So these are just some of the things that, a lot of people are not aware of, but it would help us because a lot of people think enslavement started with 1619. But again, you can at least, if you're looking at the Western Eurasian, talking about Portugal, Spain, so forth, involvement in enslavement, you can at least go back to the 1441 specifically.
It's been a long time.
It's been a long time.
I'm just curious. What's it like to be a black person under arrest in America?
It's the closest that, like I was thinking about this, they have this, I guess they call it a paddy wagon, something like this that transfers you from the place where they do booking to like the central, place where everybody has to go. So it's like, this is their catch for the night, right? So the same way you see fishermen, like this is their catch for the night. And when you're all side by side like sardines, it'll put you in the mind of like the layout of the ships of, enslavement. Like this is the closest that you could ever imagine it would be like literally being packed side by side. Once they, let you out to go into the central booking, then like literally you see hundreds. It's like, it looked like the Million Man March, which I attended back in 1995, that literally you see hundreds and hundreds of black people. I think there were 2 non-black people for the entire city of Chicago for that night, but and they stole copper out of some buildings or something, but everybody else is black people. And what they would do, they would say, oh, we're going on a fishing trip. That's when they pull you over. And if they can't find anything, then they'll plant something. Or if they do find something, then under false pretenses, they're going to say, oh, we have probable cause, so forth and so on. And then they lock you up.
Was that your first experience of being?
That was my first experience, first and last.
What were you doing before the cops stopped you?
So just to give a background, I was doing quite a lot in Chicago. I was teaching at just about every single black institution from preschool all the way up to university, teaching Chi, teaching Capoeira, teaching Yoruba, teaching Walla, teaching, tech stuff. I was doing web development, just anything that you could imagine. I had like 18 jobs at one point when I was there in Chicago. And my wife and I were gonna get married. And we decided that evening we were gonna go out and I was gonna treat her to a Soul Vegetarian. It's a restaurant there. And about a week before that, may have been a little bit more than that, I remember a woman in a Lexus, she was eating fried chicken. She wasn't paying attention. She was moving forward. Her vehicle was moving forward. And I was honking my horn. She, bam, smashed into my front left turn signal, driver's side turn signal. Trafficator, as they call it here in Ghana.
Yes.
And traffic navigator for those who may not know. So, eventually I got the check for insurance. That was on the Friday. This incident happened on the Monday. So I didn't even have time to cash the check to get it repaired or whatever. I had the estimates and whatever. But coming from that restaurant, I made a left turn. And of course, I did turn on my turn signal.
Exactly.
But the police were on the opposite side and they didn't see the turn signal because it had been broken out. So I made the left and then they decided to come behind me, pull me over. And
how many of them?
It were 2 females. Both of them were rookies, I found out, later on.
White ladies.
Of course. I wouldn't say ladies, but, white females. That's a sidebar.
I get it.
I'm in linguistics, so terminology, I'm really a stickler.
So 2 white females pulled you over.
Exactly.
Were they armed? I mean, did they point a gun at you?
They didn't point a gun at me. But they did look around and I had root beer from the Soul Vegetarian. It's a vegetarian restaurant, but they said, okay, that looks like beer. It was not beer. Okay, we're gonna go on a fishing trip, which means they're just gonna find whatever they're gonna find.
They need to arrest you.
They're going to arrest you. If they can't find anything, they'll plant something. And as a matter of fact, I remember around that time, there was this controversy where they had to do a moratorium on the death penalty because this guy named John Birch, one of the higher ups in the police force there in Chicago, had coerced all these confessions from black people. He would literally take batteries, link battery cables to the testicles of black men, zap them until they confessed to committing a murder that they never did or to doing, whatever that he knew that they didn't do. But he said, I'm booking black people. That's what it is. And as a matter of fact, what they ended up saying, so I used to do survival training. I would teach so-called at-risk youth survival training. That's CPR, that is, fire making, that's shelter construction, water purification, all these things as part of Black Survival Network. So what we would always do is we had to secure the campsite. There could be bears, there could be, ill-meaning people out there. So we are in charge of all of these youth who are from the schools that we're teaching at, and we have to secure the campsite. So what I did is I had the weapon, the firearm that I used to do so, in the trunk and then also in the container. What they decided to do, they went through everything, including the trunk, the boot as they call it in Ghana, and they found it. They decided to lie after the fact and say it was underneath my seat and it was loaded.
It was in the trunk, in the boot.
And it was in the boot,
Was
unloaded,
it
and it was in the container. Yes, it was licensed.
Okay.
I had my FOID card, that's a firearm owner's ID card. I had been going to the range to do training as a security guard. All of that was part of the survival training. And, I was even, there with people who were on the police force, like black people, of course, because I don't want to get shot. I was there with black people at the, firing range, all those types of things. So, but they don't care about any of those things. They didn't care that I had 2 master's degrees. I'm an upstanding citizen. They said, here's a black guy, we're going to send him up on a felony, right? And that's what it was. So the next morning, I got bailed out, and they said, they decided.
So you spent the night
I spent the night.
What was that like?
Like I said, it reminded you of being in prison. As a matter of fact, I knew capoeira songs about being in enslavement, so I started singing some of those capoeira songs because I've been to Brazil before. Chora meu cativeiro, quanta tristeza me dá. Cry because of my captivity, how sad it makes me. I'm just passing the time.
And how many people were in? Was it a cell, right? Or it's an open?
Yeah, eventually it was a cell.
How many of them? How many of you guys?
Probably I think 4 or 5 in that cell, and then another cell here. All these different cells in that particular precinct before they send you to that central booking, was like a
massive place.
Massive.
How young were your cellmates?
Everybody was around the same age, in their 20s, some in their teens. And what I found out was that for every single person who they arrest and that they get into this so-called correctional system, they get money for that, upwards of $100,000 per person. So they have, an impetus, they have a motivation, an incentive for
to lock you up,
enslaving as many black people as possible. And again, in the U.S., enslavement has never been abolished. According to the 13th Amendment, it says that slavery shall not exist in the U.S. or any place subject to their jurisdiction, except whereas the party has been duly convicted of a crime. They intentionally put in that caveat because they wanted to make sure that black people are still working for free. So as soon as they passed the 13th Amendment, every time it's time to harvest cotton, there's a crime wave. They started making up laws that if you spit on the ground and you're black, you get to put in jail. If you talk loudly around white people, you get put in jail. If you walk along railroad tracks in the evening, if you sell produce, if you roll dice that you bought from them, anything that you do, literally they made every single thing. It's like they would just look out the window what are black people doing? Okay, that's illegal, go arrest this guy.
Make a law and then arrest him.
Make a law and then arrest him. And again, that's how they drain the swamps. If you want to know how the U.S. was built, first on enslavement, and then after the so-called abolition of it, it's still enslavement. So they called it convict leasing, where you have a convict, and now it became such a scandal where these prisons are leasing to these corporations that are laying railroad tracks and, digging out swamps and all these different types
cheap
of
labor.
Not cheap, free.
Free labor.
Free labor. And there's a quote I remember from, I wrote an article on this called Legacies and Impact of Transatlantic Enslavement. And what one of the guards there said, he said, this is even better than enslavement, because with enslavement, you have to take care of them even during the winter when they're not working, not productive. Here, you can capture one, work him to death, and then just go arrest somebody else.
And just replace.
Right? So literally, for spitting on the ground, it could be a death sentence. For talking loudly. And the other thing is that you can't testify against so-called white people. That means that you don't even have to do it. All that has to happen is a white person said you did it. So if they say, okay, you spat on the ground, no, I didn't. There's no evidence. I didn't spit on the ground. I said you did.
You're going in.
You're going in, and that could be a death sentence.
So in the morning you wake up, and then what next? What are they charging you with?
So I got bailed out by those who were part of that same survival training group, and they said, they're saying it was under the seat and loaded. And I was like, well, it was in the trunk. So my father and my mother, they flew in. My father said, let's go back to the scene of where it happened. Maybe there's somebody who saw what went down. Because, of course, they were lying, so we need eyewitnesses. So as soon as we walked up there was a guy who we didn't even say anything. He was like, oh, you were the one who got arrested, so forth. This was maybe a couple of days later. And my father was like, how do you remember? It was like, who dresses like this? Because I told you since
You look
98,
different, yeah.
this is how I've been
Yeah,
dressing
yeah,
since the
yeah,
90s.
yeah.
He was like, nobody dresses like down the south side of Chicago. Of course I remember. And
And how old were you then?
this is like 27, 28, because I know I repatriated when I was 28. So between 27 and 28 at that time.
Yeah.
Like I said, I already completed 2 master's degrees, one in linguistics, one in African language and literature. I was, teaching at some of the universities there, doing all these upstanding, things, helping out at-risk youth, so forth. But they don't care about any of those things. Now, they ended up throwing it out because there was no basis for the rest in the first place.
Oh, so they didn't go to court?
It did end up going to court because the state's attorney has a prerogative, if it's a felony, supposedly, to pull it back up. So it was quashed under wrongful arrest, no evidence, no probable cause. So it was thrown out initially, but the state's attorney said, no, I'm prosecuting this because this is one of my stats. I'm going to use this to run for office later. This is one of my stats.
So you go to court?
And I did go to court, and I was even there at the booking, table when they went into the computer and changed what they initially wrote. They initially wrote what actually happened, which is, they went into the boot, they found it, so forth and so on. But they called, and then, so the first were 2 white females, so-called white females, who arrested me, but then they were joined by veterans who are, non-black males. And they were all standing in front of the computer, and they're like, okay, now change this, okay, do this.
Reconstruct the story.
Exactly, so I didn't know what was happening until they told me the next day. They changed it, they said it was under your seat, it was loaded, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, how could they have even seen it? It's nighttime, one. They didn't have a flashlight. There are no street lights around. And I was teaching Chi, Yoruba, Wolof, so forth. So I had a whiteboard in the car that was laying flat. There was like this much space. So you're telling me you see a black gun within 1 inch underneath with no lighting. I'm like, even if you had a light, there's no way you could have even seen that. So the attorney that I had, Andre Grant, great attorney, he said, they impounded the car, we eventually went to get it. He said, before you open it, before you do anything, take photos of what it is. Because I told him I had the whiteboard in there with how everything was laid out. Took the photos, everything. That ended up being part of our evidence. And then there was another thing that ended up really helping our case, is that I've always worn this, type of bag, right? This is again since the late 90s.
What's inside? I'm just curious.
So I keep keys, I keep, money, other things but all those types of things. So when they took me to the precinct, they decided to dump everything out onto the table, and they're looking, and they asked me, do you have any baggies? I was like, what do you mean? It's later on, they're looking for drugs. I was like, baggies, what are you even talking? I don't even know literally what they're talking about. So they're searching, there's nothing in there, so they put everything back. Now, this is still in that same evening, they start going outside and coming back and they're like, where are they? I don't know where they are. Where is it? I don't know what they're talking about. What ended up happening is the police car key, they put it into my bag as well. So the next morning, when I got my bag back, I see a key that I don't recognize, and lo and behold, it's a police car key. So I told my lawyer, this is what I found. He said, we can use this. So this is when it now came to trial. The motions, you have the pretrial motions, and it comes to trial.
You went to the court?
You went to court. So what they do is that any black person who they want to convict, they send it out from Chicago. This happened in Chicago, south side of Chicago. They send it out to Bridgeview that has a 99.9999999, because either they're going to convict you or they're going to get you a copper plea. Nobody leaves Bridgeview unscathed if you're black. And matter of fact, on the day of the sentencing, there was somebody right in front of me where they told the exact same lie, no difference. They said he had a gun, it was under the seat, it was loaded. And this is like the code between the prosecution, the police, and the judge. Like, wink, wink, here's another 100-some-odd-thousand for us. Let's book him. So literally right before my case where I was acquitted, this guy got 10 years of not seeing his family. And when I was on the witness stand, I said, never again will I allow some non-black judge who actually looked like he may have been at, one of these lynchings back in the day, like old, gray hair, so forth. I was like, never again will I be in their jurisdiction. I'm repatriating. And I knew that there were other options in the world because I had done study abroad. I had traveled to, by that time, I had traveled to, of course, here, Ghana, Nigeria, Senegal, the Gambia, Burkina Faso, Mali. So I had been around to know that there are places where police aren't going to pull these trumped up charges on you. They're not going to arrest you. They're not going to follow you around the store, all these types of things that you deal with in the US. So when I was on the witness stand, I said, never again will I be in a jurisdiction where on a whim, they can lock you up, and on a whim, they can decide you're not going to see your family for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. Some people, you had the tennis court murders of Nana Geronimo Pratt, where they knew he didn't do it. There was exculpatory evidence. There was an agent who lied, and they knew that he was lying, but they decided, you're going to prison forever, right? Mumia Abu Jamal, like all of these cases of people who are in prison for life over things that they themselves, FBI, CIA, all of them know they didn't do. But again, this is, if you're in the US, you got people who, they're like, oh, well, the roads are nice here. I can go to Walmart. I can get fast food, the cable, the internet, whatever. If you're a black person, every black person knows that you're like a fish in a barrel. And it's like, what type of fish food is necessary to make it worth it for you to know that at any point in time, there's no escaping? Literally, you could be taking a jog like Ahmaud Arbery, and not even the police, is just random, folks who say, you're not allowed to jog here, and you're dead.
When you understand that the judge is about to pronounce his sentence, what was going through your mind?
Like I said, my plan was I'm repatriating, right?
Were you confident that you would be let off?
I was. My father had, told me later on that one way or the other, he said this is not going to fly. They weren't going to allow it to just be I'm sentenced and I go to prison or whatever.
If you were jailed, how long would you have?
I think they were saying like 10 years. 10 years. To the point where that was 2008. I finished my PhD. I won the Vice Chancellor's Award for the best PhD thesis. That was for 2012, 2013. Since then, I won the Provost Publications Award for the best publication in the humanities. All of these things were taking place at a time I would have been locked up in a jail cell.
Exactly.
Right? Other awards, other things I can speak of. But I would have just been released in 2018. Look at, they're literally robbing you of your life, right? And that's what it's all about, because it's a cash system. I ended up teaching at these alternative high schools where we would have, people come in and tell them, this is a business. You think you're out doing your thing. They've given you 2 tracks. Either you can be a sellout or you can be a prisoner. That's it. Right? If you're a sellout, then you're going to help imprison the other black people. Or you can imbibe this idea that, oh, we're drug dealers and, oh, I'm a gangster and blah, blah, blah. So either you fight against being a gangster and you say, I'm going to be whoever Clarence Thomas, or you just say, all right, well, that's what they tell me I am, then I'm going to be the best gangster I can be. So those are the 2 tracks that they've laid out for you, and neither one are your options. Once you start to see, well, there are other options in the world, like I can live in Ghana, I can be a professor in Ghana, I can be a traditional ruler. I don't like the term chief for multiple reasons, but one is because in the English language, there are terms that are derogatory that are built into it. So these are some of the terms that, the British never use for themselves. What they'll say is that, as a matter of fact, in 1821, they promulgated this decree that they are the only ones who are allowed to say that they have kings. All of you people, you have paramount chiefs, you understand? And they do it across the board. They'll say they have forests, you have jungles. They have houses, you have huts. They have nations, you have tribes. And it's intentionally derogatory, but we use those terms because we don't really understand English well enough to know that we're insulting ourselves. We'll have a house of chieftaincy and national house of chiefs, and we'll say chief, chief, chief. And we don't understand that this was a law to say you have to be relegated to a lower tier.
So left to you would be like house of rulers, house of kings?
I would say I would prefer to use our indigenous terms across whatever language that we're speaking of. Togbewo,
Yes.
Whatever the term, Nime, Name, right?
Okay.
That's what I would prefer,
Yep.
right? Because there's no equivalent, like for us, the traditional ruler rules on behalf of the people, at the behest of the people. That means if you're not doing right, they'll take your sandals off,
That's it.
bop you on the head, take you across the water, and that's it.
You're done.
For them, when you say king, there are all these concepts of off with his head, let them eat cake. That's how they are. That's their system. So to make an equivalency between their concept and what our concept, it's not the same thing, right? But nowadays, because you have people who are used to that type of style, you have people who are not responsible to their people. They're not responsive to their people. They do what they want to do because they've now imbibed this, concept. Whereas you can have in a Dinkra like, which translates to one who wants to be a traditional ruler, or hene should learn service ahead of time. So, that's our concept, as a people, as opposed to their concept, off with his head, I'll do what I want, I'm the blah, 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 blah. I'm the sovereign, you see? So
diametrically opposite.
Exactly.
So
they
acquit you, and you decide that you're not going to stay in this system. Who do you tell next? Who do you tell first?
So even before the acquittal, I said that within 1 year I'm going to repatriate. I was on the witness stand. I said within 1 year I'm repatriating. That's a wrap.
Between arrest and court, how long did it take?
Probably like a good year and change.
Oh. And how many appearances in court?
Probably a good 8 or 9, including the preliminary hearings to quash the arrest and so forth. And with that, like my parents, we spent so much money on that because this is why they have a 99.99999, because whose parents are professors who think, like, let's go back to the scene. This is a lie. We're going to fight, right? How many people have parents who are going to do that? They resign themselves and say, all right, I'll just admit that I did it, even if I didn't do it, and then I'll be out in like 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, and whatever. But we're like, no, we're going to fight this. So we had people who flew from around the country, all of them dressed in traditional garb, where I had my students come in from, like I said, I was teaching at preschool, elementary school, middle school, high school, as well as the university. So they're coming in their uniforms, red, black, and green. I had people coming in traditional garb. We're in the courthouse. We're pouring libation, which is ironic. Like you come to Ghana and they're like, oh, you're not allowed to pour libation. Matter of fact, I gave a talk at the University of Ghana where one of my colleagues was in the talk I was pouring libation. And one of my colleagues was like, oh, you shouldn't pour libation. This should be a secular space and so forth. The very next week, they had the naming of one of the rooms there in the institute, and they had a pastor there singing a church song. And some of the students came up and they said, you think she's going to say something about it? I was like, I doubt it. And indeed, she did not say anything about that. But like, this is what we're dealing with here, that when you're in the U.S., I can't think of any type of event with people who know who they are who aren't pouring libation. I'll come here to Ghana, and I can't be at any event where people are pouring libation. I'll be at an event there. People are all wearing clothes made by black people, to the point where people are like, why are you wearing those, here? They're like, why are you wearing that? Oh, won't say hot. Like, all these types of things.
Look like you're from here.
Yeah. All these types of things that, they'll do here, or they'll respect our clothes to death. What do I mean by that? They'll say, oh, I can't wear a cloth. I can't wear that. I can only wear it for, big occasions. Now, surprise, surprise, those big occasions are 4 times a year. So out of the 365 days or 366 days in the year, this means you support your own people a total of 4 days, and every other day who's getting paid. So when I wear clothes like this, I call it...
What are the 4 days?
No, I'm just saying, a person may say, I'll wear this to a wedding, I'll go to Ojira, I'll go to a funeral, I'll go to outdooring, and like that may be it, right?
That's it.
Or maybe it's Friday wear, or maybe it's church. It's very rare. Like when you go to University of Ghana, that's one difference between like going to Ghana versus like I've been at University of Ibadan. At least in Nigeria, you'll find a lot more people who are wearing our clothes. Go to Burkina, and it's like almost like a social experiment where Ghana becomes, what would it be like if the entire population was trained to hate themselves? Where would our quote unquote development be? And in other places, like, what if you were just kind of hating yourself? But, I don't think it served us too well. Our roads aren't any better than anywhere else. Our infrastructure isn't, too much better. So like the self-hatred hasn't like gotten us, oh, now we're multi-trillionaires off of, hating our extended selves, because it's not like individual. So you might as well, right? Because you'll do a lot better. And I say, just like the Chinese started off with Kung Fu flicks, you can start at any point. You can just say, we're no longer buying underwear from non-black people. Just that alone keeps $1 billion+ right here in Ghana. And don't you think you could pave a couple of roads with some $1 billion?
Yeah, exactly.
Just, and what they'll do is they'll give you a word like modern. Once they give you that, now you have to aspire to whatever that's supposed to be. And guess what? Who gets paid off of modern looking clothes? Isn't it the same colonial enemies? Isn't it the same enslaving enemies that you've had? Yes, it is. And that's the reason why they gave you that word in the first place, because they'll give you a paradigm to aspire to. But guess what? That paradigm is what pays them. And, a point that I met, people say, well, you can't do everything black. And I tell them, well, you can't do everything white. Exactly. Right? So you might as well start somewhere. And then from the money that you're able to save just on the clothing issue, you can now translate that to, the alcohol issue, right? Now, in Ghana, anytime you go to a traditional ruler's house, they want schnapps made out of, Dutch, Holland, wherever. But for me, I never take that anywhere. I'll bring palm wine. And then I have to explain why I'm doing that, because they'll be like, oh, you're supposed to bring, this, so forth and so on.
I've made a mental note to myself. Next time I'm coming, I'm bringing palm wine.
That
I brought you schnapps.
You understand?
I understand.
Akuti and Nimira.
I understand. Guilty as charged.
But I never do that myself, and I don't try to make a big deal because I don't want to seem like I'm not grateful. I know that the spirit in which the person is presenting it.
Indeed.
But I tell people, like, imagine that before you can even pour libation, before you go to see any traditional ruler, you're supposed to enrich the Dutch. That means I can't even commune with my own ancestors on a libation unless I've given. Now think about the billions of dollars we've given to the Dutch. Don't you think that that's where their skyscrapers are coming from? Don't you think that's where their payrolls are coming from?
Aromatic schnapps.
Just that one single decision. This is before we go into phones and vehicles. I'm like, just that one single
Every
decision.
outdooring, every marriage ceremony,
Every single
funeral,
one. And every time
day.
you visit any traditional ruler, you're supposed to bring 2 or 4 or 6.
So
yeah.
So it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So this is economic warfare as a point that I'm making. Some people say, oh, you want to be cute, or you think it looks cute. No, this is economic warfare. We are draining the cesspool, right? We're not giving money. We're not putting food into the mouths of our enemies. We're putting it into the mouths of our own people, which is what every intelligent people on the planet Earth do, except for us, because we've been trained to be unintelligent. It's not that we don't want to be intelligent, but literally we've gone through a systematic means of making us unintelligent, where we're supporting our enemies and not supporting ourselves across the board.
So 1 year in the court system, you are acquitted. Did you decide to come to Ghana at that time?
I did.
You did?
I did, yeah.
But let's back it up. By then, were you speaking Tree?
Yeah, so I started
Where did you
speaking
learn-
Tree in 1998.
Okay. What made that decision come to you?
So as I alluded to earlier, my mother first came to Ghana in 1972. I was born in 1979. I think she said her ticket was something like $200 US.
I can believe it.
Yes. Check the difference.
Yeah.
Check the difference in price now. But she said she just saw something in the paper saying chartered flight to Africa, and it was Nana Dinizulu, who is known in the U.S. as the progenitor of the modern day resurrection of Akan spirituality. So we had Dinizulu drummers and dancers. Sometimes you hear Gil Scott-Heron albums, and they're drumming in the background and so forth. But well known in the New York circles. But from that, they started a midwifery program. So I was actually born at home, 7 Arlington Place. From the Akomfo, the trainees who were training under Nana Dinizulu, they were coming to Nana Paribia at Latte, right? So, all of these things were like that background. So my mother already had a connection. And she, like I said, she got her PhD from one of these luminous, universities in the US. But what they came to understand is that, quote unquote, white psychology is not useful for us as Black people. It's segmented, it's fragmented, it's not holistic. Whereas a traditional healer here in Ghana may, like, let's say you have an ulcer. I'll give you an example. Let's say you have an ulcer. The traditional healer may call your wife and maybe even your children to the session and find out what's going on. And then what comes out would be, oh, my wife isn't cooking for me because I've been staying out late, because I'm not eating. That's what they don't care about that in the US. It's take 2 and call me in the morning. Next. Take 2 and call me next, right?
Pharmacist gets rich.
Yeah, hey man, he gets rich. He doesn't care about the society and mending these relationships and so forth, because it's just like, give me some cash and on to the next one, right? So they said, as psychologists, they had what they referred to as African-centered psychology, where you had a whole slew of these psychologists who had doctorates from the most prestigious universities in the world, who are getting initiated into Ifa, right? Which is Afa.
In Nigeria. Yoruba.
Exactly, Yoruba. They're getting initiated into Akan spirituality. They're going to Senegal and getting initiated there. They're, basically augmenting the little bit that they learned from, the PhDs that they have. So these are, members of society who know that what our enemies have given us, if they took everything of value from you, they're not giving you anything that's going to be of value. So they took your name, they took your language, they took your clothing, they took your food. Literally there are places where if you spoke your own language, they would cut your tongue out. That's just to tell you. So that's different from having something around your neck. It's like, no, you're really not going to do that. Yeah. After the Stoner Rebellion in the US, at least, they banned drumming. That's why in other places, you go to Brazil, you can go to Cuba, where they still have the congas and so forth, atabaques and so forth. But in the US, we have handbone, where you just slap.
Yeah.
Because we don't have drums, because after the Stoner Rebellion, they realized we're using our drums and our languages in order to communicate and say there's an uprising, everybody rise up, so forth. They're like, no, we can't have it.
Band
so
of drums.
if they took everything away from you, what makes you think that they're going to give you an education? What makes you, so they'll give you a miseducation, but they're not going to give you an education. They're going to give you a religion where you're going to pray to them, but they're not going to let you know how you can connect with your own ancestors. They'll tell you, oh, your ancestors are bad, pray to Saint Mary and Saint this, what is that but y'all's ancestors, right? Oftentimes, imaginary ancestors that we're now taught that we need to, pray to, they're going to save us, they're going to help us, and blah, 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 but ours are vilified. So, it's all part of the same scam. It's like, Kweku Anansi type level of scam, where anything they tell you, they know how they're going to benefit from it. So that's essentially it.
And you come to Ghana first time. What was that experience like?
So 1998, my mother was, basically like, all right, well, let me bring my son. I just started my first year at Morehouse College in Atlanta. And she wanted to expose me to other things. So I came. And at that time, I was just like, this is mom's thing. I'm just going along for the ride.
Where did you live?
I was in Atlanta at that time.
No, where did you live in Ghana when you came?
Oh, when I came to Ghana, so the first time it was 2 weeks, so we went around Ghana.
Okay.
The second time it was 2 weeks, we went around Ghana. When I came for study abroad, so that was 98, then 99, and then from 2000 to 2001, I was living at Medina Firestone. I passed by there just about every day on the way to University of Ghana. I haven't actually been back to that compound. I was just thinking the other day, I was like, I need to go and see it, because it wasn't even completed at that time.
Yeah,
I was in the so-called boys' quarters. I was like, I need to go back to that compound and see what it looks like. But yeah, right there at Medina Firestone. Initially, I was at Ish 1. At that time, there was no Ish 2. It was way out in the bush. You had to walk all the way to the night market in front of the university at night and then come all the way back. But I was doing that for one semester, and I was on a full academic scholarship. So when the second semester I was off campus, I got all of that money for myself. I was like, I should have done this from the beginning. This is a much better thing. But yeah, so I started learning Chi, really just like Medasi and Mipao, like the 98. By 99, I went through a very serious transformative experience where I really saw the value of what my parents inculcated in me from childhood. That, we're not Americans, this is not our place, this is not our land, so forth. And I was just imbibing Chi. I was reading Akam philosophy, Nana Kwame Jeche, Kwesi Uredu, anything that I could get in terms of textbooks. I was listening to cassette tapes, anything, like any segment, anything I could do to hear the language.
Back in the States?
This was back in the US.
Okay.
So by the time I came here, I was harassing everybody. How do you say this? Oh, bache. How do you say this, mama? How do you say this, shini? How do you say it? Like, I'm just like, oh man, it's too much, man. Yeah. But by the time...
You're very fluent now.
Yeah. So that's what I teach at the University of Ghana. So I teach Ghanaians the Tree language at the University of Ghana, which was my goal. By 99, I said I want to learn it well enough that I can actually teach it at the university level, and that's what I'm doing now. In addition to teaching Medu Neche, that's what they call hieroglyphs. I teach Yoruba, I teach Wolof.
Where did you learn Yoruba?
I started learning Yoruba at University of Wisconsin-Madison for my degree in African languages and literature, and then also in linguistics. And then I did advanced studies at Ibadan.
So you went to Ibadan?
Of course,
okay.
Yeah. Which is really central in terms of like the Oyo type of Yoruba. I was learning Yoruba Bububu, the standard, Yoruba reading, writing, doing essays, reading every genre in terms of plays, in terms of Aloy Jakpa, which are like the Anansi stories here. They have Aloy Jakpa, which are the tortoise tales. So just imbibing everything to the point where most recently, this must have been 2021, I was invited to be a fellow at Unilag. They had a program for the revamping of the African Studies program. And I'm able to have like debates in Yoruba about, theological topics, to the point where the Yoruba people are like, all right, let's switch back to English. I'm like, what is your bell? Because I learned it to the point where anything I know how to say in English, I want to know how to say it in Yoruba. Whereas when you're born here, like I mentioned this the other day, you have people who don't know counting. Like they're so used to doing their transactions in English that if you start talking about Ghana City and Pimaduano, they're like, what is that, right? Once you really even go past 5, 6, 7, now people are like, what is this? Basic things that I'm approaching the language like any child should know these things like animals. You have people who say, oh, Sebo is tiger. There are no tigers here on the continent.
Must be leopard, right?
It's leopard, exactly, right? But people say, catch a tiger by his... Sebo, that's tiger. I'm like, no, that's leopard, you mean? But I'm like, these are things like like shapes, right? And Fefabang, that's how you call shapes and Chi. Like I'll tell people, ahinasa, ahinanai, and they're like, what is that? That's triangle, that's square, colors. I remember I was at the School of Languages conference, And it was the first time this language controversy came up under Prof. Apoko Ajimai, where she said, oh, it should be mandatory for us to speak our indigenous languages. People were like, well, how would you say photosynthesis? How would you say this? How would you say hydrogen? And I was like, that's Greco-Roman baby talk.
Yes.
If you understand what hydro means water, gen means to produce or generate, right? We have words like that. Matter of fact, one of the bynames of Onyame is Amusu, Dia Omma Utsu, the one who gives rainwater. Like, these are not complex terms, but when people say stuff like that, it means that they don't understand English well and they don't understand their own language. They're like in between, like ampang. They're not quite a bird. They're not quite an animal. So it's like, what are you? But yeah, those are some of the things. So I was learning the language. I did my PhD on three literary dialects of Akan, that is Asante Tree, Ekwepem Tree, and Fanti, and how all three of those dialects make serial verbs into nouns. It was on serial verb nominalization.
Break it down for my 15-year-old son.
No problem. So if your 15-year-old son knows a word like J, or two words, J and D, you are making it into a noun like Jidie.
Okay, believe.
Right. So J is literally to like receive something. D is to eat something, but when you put them together, they have a different meaning. That's what happens when these serial verbs are made into full lexicalized, serial verbs.
Okay. I'm even thinking about that in ever. Because belief will be hose. Ho means to take, and se means to hear.
Hear, exactly.
Take and hear.
Yeah.
Believe.
Yoruba is the same. Ba, receive, hear.
Yeah. Same concept.
And then to make it a noun, igbagba, right? So all across, you can find this in languages like Sranan. You can find it in, Suriname, in Guyana, in Jamaica, all these different places. And usually it's the syntax that will let you know that this is still a language of Black people.
Yes.
One thing that I find quite ironic is that the syntax here in Ghana is becoming eroded because of the influence of English. And the example I always give is because of the copula. So what that is to say, I am hot, I am cold. You wouldn't phrase it like that in Chi or, these other languages. You would say, ahuro deme, awademe. And you're saying that this steam has taken hold of me.
Yes.
This cold has taken hold of me. And the word for cold is coming from to like prick you.
Yes.
Deme, right?
Yes.
But because people are already they're
thinking in English.
So even when they think they're speaking Tree, they're speaking Tringlish. So they'll say Maya hot, or Maya cold, or Maya say, or Maya away.
I am.
Yeah.
Which doesn't exist in Tree.
Exactly. So what they're doing is that they're taking a non-Black syntax and it's literally like rewiring their brains. That's probably one of the best examples I can give, but it's across the board.
Isn't that the recipe for confusion?
It certainly is a recipe for confusion. And you have a lot of people, that's why they get confused to the point where they don't even know that there are certain words that exist anymore. And what they'll do, rather than say, I'm deficient and I haven't learned it, they'll say, our language is primitive, it doesn't have this word, as opposed to thinking in the language and knowing that we do have those words. This is my youngest son who's passing by.
I like the way he passed through, man. Just passing through, man.
Just passing through is like, whatever y'all are doing,
I love it, man.
I'm going about my business,
I love it.
That's
and that just gives us enough time to take a break and just remind you that if you haven't yet subscribed, this is the time to do it and hit the notification bell so that more content this way comes your way. I'm having a very illuminating chat with Ɔbenfo Ọbádélé Bakari Kambon. He's an academic, he's a traditional ruler, and he is all about the rebirth of Africa and repatriation, and we'll get into all those conversations. Just quickly though, so what does Ọbádélé mean? It's your name.
Right. Ọbádélé comes from Oba, which translates to traditional ruler, quote unquote king. O, which is he or she, because it's a gender neutral pronoun. De arrives, ile, house. So the king, he arrives at the house. And this is how, this is going back into the syntax. You'll find Black people in places like the US, they'll be like, oh, Chichi, she went down to Holly Springs. So-and-so, he didn't. So it's like a resumptive pronoun. You've already mentioned who it is, but then you say, he did this or she did that. A lot of our languages had that as our syntactic structure. It's eroded in some places, but you'll still find dialects of Fanti that do it like that and so forth. But that's what it translates to, the quote-unquote traditional ruler. He arrives at the house. Ọbádélé.
Okay, and then Bakari?
Bakari. So what we first learned it from was from a name book. My parents got all of our names. Matter of fact, in my library, I have the name book where my father wrote the names that we were going to have. This is back in, 77, 78, 79. And what we got as the original translation is of noble promise, right? Now, I read Mam Sheikh Anta Diop, and he said that there was a ruler of classical Kemet who had the name Bakari. And it translates to the Ba is like the aspect of the self, like the Se and Eve. The Ka is another aspect of the self, it's like the Kra and Chi. And then Re, which is referring to the sun, right?
Same
Bakari.
Re. Sun.
There you go.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We're all one people.
One time.
So, that's what it actually comes to is Bakari. And I didn't believe it at first. I thought it was coming from Arabic and Bakar and so forth. So I actually looked it up and found out that the ruler name Tintamani, also known as Tanwetamani, that was his name, Bakari. And you can actually see it written. So that's on the side of my vehicle for my personal website, obadalecambon.com, that my logo is that name in a chenu, what they call a cartouche, Bakari. So you're actually reading Medu Neter anytime you look at that. And then the last name, Kambon, they got it again from the same name book, and it said in the name book of the people. And we had the idea, in the spirit of the people, but then come to find out that exact same name exists in Dagbanle, right? Where you'll have Kambon Se, Kambon Na, so forth and so on. Yeah? So these are the warriors, tended to be the fusiliers, those who had, these traditional guns. Who were particularly of Asante extraction. So, these are the names, Ọbádélé Bakari Kambon, and all of my children have a good 8, 9, 10 names that tell them who they are. The names define them, they direct them, they delineate, they show them who they're supposed to be.
You landed in Ghana 17 years ago. What shocked you?
Nothing shocked me because I lived here before. Now,
what surprised
25 years ago, what surprised me is that by the time I was at the end of that academic year, I would say kind of tongue-in-cheek, I need to go back to the U.S. so I never have to see another U.S. flag. Because around my way, we have red, black, and green flags, which is a flag for all black people, unveiled 105 years ago by Nana Marcus Garvey. And I said, I need to go back to the U.S. so I never have to see another white Jesus. Because anytime you sit in a taxi, anytime you see on the back of a church, this is white Jesus. Now, what's so ironic about this is you can go to places like the Vatican. You can go to places like Czechoslovakia or Czech Republic now. You can go to Poland. You can go to Italy, broader Italy beyond the Vatican. You can go to France. You can go to Portugal, and you'll see the Black Madonna, which is Mary, and then the child, which is supposed to be Jesus, and they're depicted as black people. Now, they left all of those depictions right where they are. There are somewhere between 400 and 500 plus depictions of a black Jesus all throughout Western Eurasia, what they refer to as Europe, even though that's not a continent. But when they came here to enslave and colonize us, they left all of those and they brought the recent ones from the 1400s that were done by Michelangelo and all these so-called Renaissance artists. That's intentional. You understand? They knew about those depictions, but they decided you, as a black person, will never see any of those depictions. You're only going to see the ones that make it look like the same ones who are enslaving you look exactly like the one who's the only begotten son of the creator of everything. You understand?
So Ghana was awash with all those images.
All those images. So it shocked me, and it would really annoy me. Now I've been around it so often that it's still, I guess, annoying, but it doesn't have the same type of effect. I just already knew when I came to live here permanently, I knew what I was going to deal with. I have lots. Now, it's interesting that they have this controversy about whether you can have long hair and be in school in Ghana, once again, like the Achimota thing. And I want people to look up Ptahhotep, Ptahhotep. This is regarded as the author of the oldest book in the history of the entire world. And you'll see that he has locks. But do you think those who are saying you can't have locks and be a scholar, do you think they've ever seen a picture of Imahu Ptahhotep? No. Beyond that, do you think they've ever read the instructions of Imahu Ptahhotep? No. And it's because of that ignorance, those who are in charge of education, they themselves are lacking, because what most of us are taught, and this isn't to speak too broadly, but every time I teach Intro to African Studies at University of Ghana, I always start off with fact-finding to see where my class is. And I ask them a couple of questions, a series of questions. I ask them, what do you think of when you think of quote-unquote Africa? What I prefer to say, Abibi Mine, because Abibi Mine means land of black people, whereas Africa doesn't mean anything. People don't even know what it means. That's a sidebar. And they say, I think of corruption, poverty, hunger, blah, blah. They go down the whole list of all these things. And I say, I'm surprised you didn't mention writing, because we invented writing. And I mentioned these bone and ivory tags that are found, in the tomb UJ at Abydos, and I go into Gunter Dreyer and all these things, how they predate the Mesopotamian ones by 200 years. And so they've never heard of any of these things. I show them the actual images.
What's the look on their face, or how do they react when you tell them?
Sometimes I tell them, go online, right? This is interactive, so go online and look at what I'm telling you.
Don't tell you you're lying.
I said this isn't church.
Yeah.
So you're not supposed to believe anything that I say. You're supposed to research everything that I say. I don't want you to believe me. I want you to go and do your research. The reason why you don't know it isn't because of belief or lack of belief. It's because you've never heard of this a day in your life. And I say, I'm surprised you don't mention mathematics, because the oldest mathematical instruments on the planet Earth were from the fibula of baboons. And it was showing multiplication, division, prime numbers, all these, the Lumbombo bone, the Ishango bones, and they've never even heard of these things. And they're like, well, why is it a baboon fibula? And I say, well, in Kemet, the divinity associated with mathematics was also depicted as a baboon. That's Jehuti. And the idea is that mathematics is associated with counting lunar cycles and the moon. That's why it's thought that the first mathematicians were females, because they needed to know when they could get pregnant, when they can count their cycle, and so forth. So, they've never even heard of this. And I'm saying what the baboon is known for is howling at the moon. So what they're telling you is that they have a deep understanding of the connection between all of these things. The first and the second mathematical instruments that are about 10,000 years apart from each other in terms of age, going from over 30,000 to over 20,000 years ago, that all of those are made with the fibula of a baboon. You can go to around 5,000 years ago and find that exact same baboon being associated with mathematics. This means that as Black people, we had this understanding for over 30,000 years up to now. But now, when I say, I'm surprised you didn't say mathematics. Mathematics, what do you mean? Pythagoras invented mathematics and so on. I was like, Pythagoras came to study in Kemet. Plato came to study in Kemet, to the point that Plato as they say in Ghana, he is known for in the laws, where they asked him, what do you think of Greek education? And he says, when he thinks of Greek education, he's embarrassed for not only himself, but all of the Greek world, because Greek education is education for guzzling swine, pigs. These are the Greeks. These are the ones who were told, worship the Greeks. The Greeks themselves were worshiping Black people, to the point where anyone who becomes a doctor, they have to recite the Hippocratic Oath. But if they found out, they would learn that Hippocrates worshipped Imhotep in the form of Asclepios, at the temple of Asclepios. So these are things that they've never heard of. So when they say, if you don't know things, then your actions are going to be based on ignorance. Like you can't have locks and, be a student and study and
Did
scholar.
University of Ghana have issues with you, a lecturer, having dreadlocks?
They didn't.
Locks? They didn't?
They didn't. But they would have had issues with if I was born in Ghana. Like I got a pass because they knew I'm not born here, and they probably figure I'm going to start a petition like we did for Gandhi must fall or something. I'm going to raise a stink. Because I had another colleague who's Ebe, who was on the staff there, and he said, I wish I could do like you, because I went to administration and I grew my hair out, I let my beard, grow out, and they said, go back home and shave and come back after you shave. They would never say that to me. They've never said that to me. I've been working at University of Ghana since 2014. No one has ever told me. As a matter of fact, when I did my PhD viva, that's my defense, I wore my traditional cloth. I had my abosom beads on. I had porcupine quills in my head. I had my locks, I had everything. And again, I won the award amongst all PhDs, those who had short hair and long hair and anybody other hair. I won the award for the best PhD thesis in the humanities. It's the first time that someone from the so-called diaspora ever won that. I don't know if anyone from the diaspora has won it even since then.
What was your topic?
That's what I was saying, serial verb nominalization in Akan.
Yeah.
Yep.
Congratulations.
That's,
And how did the Viva go?
the Viva went great. Matter of fact, Prof. Samuel Jesse Obing, he asked me the same question. For the Viva, they're trying to find out, did you really write it?
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So he asked me a linguistics-based question that I should be able to answer. He says, can you give me a morphological breakdown of Ọbádélé? And I told him exactly
what you told me.
Yeah, what I told, and he was like, yeah, that's a great job, because he's in morphology. So he's, if I can do this huge thesis, I should at least know how to break down my name, which of course I did. I had a student, she's doing the PhD now, and she's Yoruba, right? And she got the tones wrong. She wrote Ọbádélé, which is mid-tone, high tone. That's incorrect. The reason it's incorrect is because of what's called, you have these auto-segmental tones. That means that the tone on O, Ọba, O, De, Ile, even though the O itself gets elided, the tone remains and it drifts onto the A for Ọbádélé. That's how you get the three tones. So here is a native Yoruba speaker who studied linguistics, and she's one of my PhD students. I had to correct her. So yeah, I know what I'm doing where it comes to linguistics, to the point where even native speakers who are even trained in linguistics, I can give them. And matter of fact, all the time, I have my colleagues who will ask me, what's the word for this? What's the word for that? How would you break this down? And it's mutual because I'm still learning as well.
Yes.
But it lets you know that you are accepted and respected when people will come to you for, this is my native language. I've studied linguistics. How do you say this? How do you understand this? How would you analyze this? Phrase, things along those lines.
I'm curious, when you dream, what language do you dream in?
People have asked me that. It depends on who I'm speaking to in the dream. So if I saw you in the dream, I would probably start off with Hindi,
Exactly.
So that's really the basis of it, because it's like the children here. So I mainly speak to my children, like I've never spoken to them in English. So I mainly speak to them in Chi, sometimes in Yoruba, sometimes in Wolof. Like we actually teach those in the morning. I homeschool my children. And depending on who they're speaking to, so they know their grandmother, when they see her face, they switch to English. When they look at me, they already know, don't bring the English to me, right? So it's the same thing. Like you look at who you're talking to, and that determines what language you're going to use, whether you're in the world here or in the dream state.
When you started teaching, when you teach Pan-Africanism and African spirituality to you in your classes, what are some of the reactions you get from students, especially since their education has been dominated by Western thought and Western systems of ways of thinking?
Yeah, even the idea of Western is quote unquote Western in the sense that, that's a Greco-Roman worldview where they thought that the center of the world was basically the Aegean Sea, and everything to the west of that is the West, and everything to the east of that is the East, where you have the so-called Holy Roman Empire and the Byzantine Empire. Like that's not even our worldview. What makes that West? Matter of fact, a couple of years ago, someone wanted me to go and give a presentation in Germany for an all-black, teachers union. And they said, I know you don't want to come to the West. I took a screenshot of the map and I said, Germany is east of where I live in Ghana. What are you talking about? People talk about global South and they say, yeah, China's part of the global South. I say, look at Northeast China. Look on the map. Anybody look on the map? Northeast China is further north than anywhere in the continental US. What are we talking about? And then on top of that, the oldest map in the history of the world was made in Kemet. That's what they call the Turin Papyrus map, or the map of Amenacht.
Kemet is what people refer to as
Kemet is what people refer to as Egypt, but I only use Kemet because Kemet means the land of black people. And we called ourselves collectively Kemetu, which translates to black people. Individual men would call themselves Kim. Individual women would call themselves Kemet. So that's that. Now, it's a south up map because they were in the northern hemisphere. And for anyone who's in the northern hemisphere, you have to look southeast to your left-hand side in order to see the sunrise. You have to look southwest to your right-hand side. So they use the same word for east and left and west and right. That means that the map ended up being a south up map. But now, there's an expression where they'll say, you don't even know which way is up. All of us are used to an upside down map. All of us are used to, all these things, the idea of the West and global South and so forth. But to answer your question, oftentimes I found that they have no idea what Pan-Africanism is, and a lot of people confuse all Africanism with Pan-Africanism. And we actually had Nachim Wezu, a noted author, come on to Abibi Tumi and, give a series of classes about Pan-Africanism. And that the original idea of Pan-Africanism from the 1900 conference on Pan-Africanism was, when they say African, they only meant black people. They use the term African, black, and Negro interchangeably. But ever since the 1945 Pan-African Congress, you had a hijacking of the term Pan-Africanism, where you're no longer talking about black people regardless of location. You're talking about location regardless of whether or not you're black. That's why they had the All African Peoples Conference. That's where you had the All African People's Revolutionary Party. This means anyone who's on the continent is allowed to come in. So at that conference, they had, the Arab enslavers there. They invited the Dutch Boers there. Everybody's coming there except for, like, as a state, the black representatives of black countries that are located outside of the U.S. You had individuals who could come, but it wasn't here as a formal, recognition of this country or that country or so forth. So, that's on that note. But again, a lot of people use the word Pan-Africanism, but they don't have a good grasp of the history of even the idea. They don't have any idea that even the term has been hijacked. They don't have any idea when we talk about spirituality of what that even is. Their idea of it is Nollywood movies or Gollywood movies or Kumawood movies. They don't understand anything about the worldview. And like matter of fact, I taught a course called Foundations of African Thought. Here's my son, Nanaya.
Yes.
I taught a course called Foundations of African Thought, and we were going through the creation stories, or I should say transformation stories, of people throughout the continent. And this is, looking at Kemet, looking at Congo, looking at what's now modern-day Ghana, Nigeria, Mali, Burkina, and so forth. And So we went through all these different creation stories, and I asked all Ghanaian students, I said, how many of you know the creation stories of your own people? Not a single hand.
Zilch.
Zero. Not the Ewe people, not the Gan people, not the Akan people, not anything. The most they knew was, oh, Abrewa, pounding the fufu. I'm like, that's not.
Pushing the sky away.
Right? That's not what we're looking for. And one of the students found that to be very profound. They're like, all we know is about Adam and Eve and a rib and let there be light and so forth. And I'm like, if you actually understand our creation stories, they're very scientific, because when you say Arade, Nyankopon, Arade is the feminine aspect of the quote-unquote creator, whereas Nyankopon is the masculine aspect. Same thing with the Ewe. When you say Mawu, that's talking about the feminine, and then Lisa is referring to the masculine. But because of Bible translations, when people say Mawu, they'll say he, capital He. That's actually the feminine one, right? Feminine. If you look at the God, they say Ata, Na, Nyongmo. That's very scientific, that to create life or to create anything, you require the male and the female to create. Whereas theirs is very unscientific, where you have to believe it. Like what we're saying is, you don't have to believe it. No one has to show a child on Yame, the quote-unquote creator. That is, again, if you understand creation, then you understand procreation. And then on the other side, if you understand procreation, you understand creation. So when they talk about whether it's Yoruba or classical Kemet, that in the beginning were primordial waters, all that existed were waters that were hidden, that were wet, that were dark, and that were infinite. You're describing the womb of a black woman. That's what you're actually doing. When you describe the process of creation and the sun coming into that water, you're actually describing the process of procreation. When you're describing that from there came two, the two became four, the four became eight, you're talking about what modern day science talks about, the splitting of the zygote into 2, 4 cells, 8 cells, and everything. That's why our divination systems are like 256, because you're going from the 2 to the 4 to the 8 to the 16. And because of that binary system is the reason why you're getting SD cards and hard drives that are formatted for 2 gigabytes, 4 gigabytes, 8 gigabytes, 16, so forth, 256, 512, so forth. 1048. So all of those are there. But basically, this is where they actually come to understand that our spiritual systems are not belief. When they say, oh, our belief systems, I say, we don't have belief systems.
The science.
They have belief systems, which is they're going to tell you a woman came from a man, but meanwhile, that woman has a belly button. The man has a belly button. What was it connected to? Why was it connected? Like, these are the insane things, but they'll tell you if you don't believe it, then, the Fourth Crusade, we're killing other Christians, right? What they'll tell you, if you don't believe it, we'll cut your head off. That's for, Islam, that's for Christian sanity, that's for all of them, that if you don't believe it, then we're going to kill you. Whereas ours is not even based on belief, it's that everyone can see it, and it's a shared reality. What we're doing is actually based on solar phenomena and celestial phenomena that everyone can see. So we'll give you an allegory that describes this person and that person. The rising of the sun on December 25th is talking about how the sun rises in the southeast after you have these 3 stars of Orion that point to the star called Sirius, and that line points to exactly where the sun rises on December 25th. Meanwhile, people are here waiting for Santa Claus to come through their chimney. If they actually understood what the story meant and where it came from, the pyramid text and the coffin text and the book of Coming Forth by Day, then they would know a lot about astronomy, because that's what those stories were for, were to teach even children, to the point that when they came of age, they understood everything about them, a shared reality that's not based on belief. It's that story helped me to understand a lot about what goes on in the universe around me.
And after you've taken your students to a class like that, at the end of the class, what kind of reactions do you get?
So I actually interviewed them at the end of the class.
Yeah.
They were like, this is transformative. This is life transforming. I'll never be the same. This is the most profound class I ever had. I, recorded all of those because I was like, for posterity. Now, lo and behold, after a couple of years, they brought in somebody, from a philosophy department somewhere, who replaced all of that with Greek philosophy. It's a course called Foundations of African Thought. He starts teaching Socrates and Plato and Aristotle and Hume and Hegel and Kant.
Meaning these are the foundations of African thought?
Meaning whatever he meant by it. But, by that time, I was already off the class. Now I'm on sabbatical. I'm teaching my own children. So whatever they're doing,
let them do it.
Let them do whatever they're doing. Yeah.
There's been a conversation around mother tongue language, which has just resurfaced. And just your thoughts on that.
So my thoughts, again, we talk about demonstration over conversation. So as I said, my thoughts are best articulated in what I actually do. So if you look, in the classroom, On Mondays, we teach Chi. Tuesdays, Yoruba. Wednesdays, Wolof. Thursdays, Medu Necha. And then Fridays, Kiswahili.
What is Medu Necha?
Medu Necha is the writing system of classical Kemet, what people know as quote-unquote ancient Egypt, what people know as quote-unquote hieroglyphs. That's the writing system. The original writing system that you see on all the doors around here, including the front door, the side doors, all those are written in Medu Necha because that's one of the things that I teach at the University of Ghana. I studied that back in undergrad, back in '99. Again, after this year of study abroad, I went back, studied as a formal class, got an A in the class.
Nice one.
Of course.
Yeah.
But that's what you see all around the entire structure.
What did you say you teach on Fridays again?
Kiswahili and Kikongo.
Kikongo.
Yeah.
Okay.
We rotate between those two.
All right.
So my thoughts are what I actually do, which is that people should know their own languages. Now, for us, in the so-called diaspora, our mother tongues are not our indigenous languages because our mothers were forced, conscripted, whether that is their mother, grandmother, great-grandmother, they were forced to speak the language of our enemies. So our own languages are not the languages that our mothers speak. But, that's why we are, on the case to rectify that situation.
So the theory of endogenous and exogenous motivation in L2 migration.
That was my first award for the Provost Publications Award. Yep.
Break it down for us. What does that mean?
So basically, people talk about SLA, second language acquisition. And what I did is I showed that to say acquisition is treating language like an object. I've acquired this object.
That can be bought.
That can be bought, that can be sold, whatever. I've acquired something, right, as a possession. And I said, that's just an analogy. We don't have to, be married to that analogy. We can look at a different analogy and we can say that language learning is like migration away from one place and towards another place. So really you have different motivations. Sometimes you can have a push factor, like Donald Trump in migration is pushing people out like, I don't want to be here, get me out of here, right? And then on the other side, you have pull factors like, this is the land of my ancestors. I want to come, and the land of my ancestors and my descendants. I want to come back here. I want to establish a family. I want to have something to pass on to, the future generations. So basically looking at the motivations in terms of the push factors, in terms of the pull factors, in terms of migrating away from, what you're used to, what you've grown up in and so forth. And the degree to which you have that motivation is the degree to which you are able to have a successful migration, right? And those who reviewed the paper thought that it was innovative because a lot of people don't do theory, even on the continent, period. People say, oh, there's too much theory. People really don't create their own theories. What they do is basically what they do with Galamsey, which is they have raw materials, which is what their grandmother's lullabies in the village. That's the raw materials. They'll take a theory like, who knows what, Marxism or you name it, neoliberal. They'll take some theory from outside, that's the excavator. They'll bring the excavator to the village, they'll dig out the raw materials, and then they'll give it to them in a journal, and now you are a professor because you gave them your raw materials, right? When we start creating, and matter of fact, I had one of my students who said when he was in the English department, he had a class that had two professors there, and they said, oh yes, we Africans, we can't do theory. Only white people can do theory. This is what they said out of their mouth. Not to, badmouth any department, but
How did they become professors?
That's how they became professors.
Wow.
By adhering to that.
What a statement.
So, ever since then, I've developed multiple theories that are original, to me, the Dikenga theory coming from the idea of everything that exists follows these cyclical steps of, the cosmogram of the Congo, the people of Congo. Everything has a sunrise, everything has a high point, everything has a sunset, back to a midnight, and then back to sunrise. So whether that's a civilization, whether that's a person, and what you're looking at here, this is the reason why we pour libation, because the idea is that even if the sun sets, it doesn't stop existing. That means that even if that person's sun has set, because every person is seen as in Tangwa Moyo, a living sun, even if that person's sun has set, they haven't stopped existing. You're just not seeing them. But just like how we know the sun itself exists, we know that person has only transformed. That's why I said the idea of quote-unquote creation stories is, again, not part of our worldview. It's about transformation. And the beginning was transformation, and all that there ever is transformation. That's where you get Jenyame. Abodi Santini Fritite. Which is the great precession of creation, as they call it, creation, exists from time immemorial. No one lives who knows its beginning, and no one will live to see its end except for Onyame. That's the idea, is that all you have is this transformation that you see in the Jinyame symbol.
So you don't believe in end of the world theory?
I don't deal with belief, I deal with knowledge, right?
You don't know about the end of the world.
I know that people say that, but then I also know what our ancestors have written who know a lot more about it. And basically, because all of these things that people refer to as creation and in the world, theories and so forth, they're based on the Amu, that's the Eurasian worldview, that time is a line. That's their worldview, it's not universal. They think time is a line, whereas all the way from classical Kemet, we would say this, life is a cycle, right? So once you understand that, then you understand that when you're talking about the so-called creation story, that idea is that in the beginning, everything was like a womb. And then if you read such texts like the Coffin text, it talks about how in the end, all you have is Atum and Asar. And Atum represents completion, ceasing, coming to an end. And Asar represents regeneration. It talks about how they transform and then they dissipate into the primordial waters. Now, what are the attributes of the primordial waters? The exact same attributes as existed in the beginning. Everything is Amen, Amenet, masculine and feminine hiddenness. Nun, Now, Net, masculine and feminine wetness. Ket, Ket, masculine and feminine darkness. And then Het and Het, masculine and feminine infiniteness, right? So what that's telling you is that everyone came from a womb, and in the end, everyone will go to a womb. Now, isn't that something that everyone can attest to? We came from a womb. We're going to go into a womb. Transformation, we're going to come back in a womb. We go back into a womb. So these are things that aren't belief. They're based on things that everyone can see and everyone can attest to.
If you were made Minister for Education and you had to put up a language policy, what would it look like for education?
Yeah, I would, probably something along the lines of indigenous languages are mandatory. I would do a lot in terms, so I can't even count the amount of times that people don't know that there are dictionaries for Akan. And then I'll tell them I have like a good 20 dictionaries for Akan. So, I have the 1933 Cristallo dictionary, I have the 1875 one, I have the dictionary by Berry, I have the one from Kofi, the quadrilingual dictionary, which is English, Ewe, Ga, and Akan dictionary. Like I can just start listing off all these dictionaries. I have the J.O. Anani Advanced Akan dictionary. I have the one from Asim Kwesi Bwadi. Like they've never even heard that these dictionaries exist, much less have they ever read them. So the people who are like, oh, well, how would you say hydrogen? How would you say lithium? Lithium just comes from the word lithos, which means stone. Do you have a word for stone in your language?
Of course.
If you think, oh, lithium, oh, that's so, I'm like, that's Greco-Roman baby talk. If you think that you don't have a word that would be equivalent to lithium, it means you don't know English well enough to know the etymology of it, and you don't know your own language well enough that we have oboe, if we wanted to do that. Or we can reconceptualize it apart from how it's rendered in Greco-Roman baby talk as our own, word. So that was very helpful for me to do my thesis on serial verb nominalization because I'm seeing how across the various dialects of Akan, new words can be created and have been created. So in the late 1800s, people weren't under this thing of, oh, our languages are primitive, there's no way to say such and such and such. There's a word for potassium permanganate, and it translates to when it touches water, it turns red. That's the word for it.
That's it.
Now, you can either look at the etymology of what potassium comes from, permanganate, what is that for, such and such, or you can say, based on what it does.
And what you can see.
And what you can see, I can rename it something entirely separate. So you have different options. But if you have been subjected to miseducation, you're never going to think along those lines. And there's a quote by Mam Sheikh Anta Diop where he says, these quote-unquote European languages are not supposed to be viewed as diamonds under a glittering glass bell that we're supposed to just, He says what we're to do is to see that the languages, the paths that were open for those languages' development are open to all of us. So if you can see that he's, this is again Mam Sheikh Anta Diop, who's translating the theory of relativity into Wolof, right? You can look at all these things in terms of physics, in terms of engineering, so forth, that we can, chemistry, even the word chemistry comes from the word chemet. Some people say, oh, we can't do chemistry. The word for it came from your own society, which translates to land of black people. So, these are the things that, we're dealing with because, again, until we have an education system, and I often say that there's a miseducation system in Ghana that reinforces, like I've seen the textbooks that say, who is this? And it's a picture of a so-called white, quote-unquote, Jesus. I've seen what are the benefits of colonization. Like these are the things that the youth are getting. So it's no surprise that, when you see the roads, when you see ECG light off, here are people who think that they're worthless. They've never done anything. And I've actually had students, matter of fact, a student in African studies told me, matter of fact, there was another student who said, go and say it to Ɔbenfo, say it to Ɔbenfo at that time, Okuni, say it to him. And I said, so she was like, okay, I'll say it to him. If not for white people, we would all be monkeys swinging from trees. This is a student of African studies at the graduate level, and this is what she said. There was another sister when I was living at Frafraha who said, black people can't do anything good, only white people can do good things. Look around you,
brainwashing is deep.
Brain dirtying. This is the end result of miseducation. And it's not that way because we want it to be, it's that way because someone benefits from it being that way. Because once you think you're worthless, well then how do you get clothes of those who are worthwhile?
Indeed.
Once you think you're worthless, how do you get the chemicals to bleach your skin and to perm your hair and all these other types of things?
I'm just thinking, so still in your Minister of Education role, so what would happen? Would the education in, say, Tamale be different from the education in Accra?
Yeah, definitely.
So, but imagine, so I'm married to maybe, for argument's sake, maybe somebody who speaks Fanti, and I'm living in Accra. What language are you teaching me in school?
Yeah,
my children in school.
To say what language is incorrect, because as black people, I'm yet to meet someone who's monolingual. There's a joke that they say, and this is the thing, these ideas, even the terminology, are coming from societies that tend to be like monolingual, right? Or most bilingual to a lesser degree, or there's diglossia in the society. But basically, like I'm yet to meet someone who is growing up, let's say that person is in Nima. And in Nima, you'll encounter Hausa, you'll encounter Ga, you'll encounter Yoruba, you'll encounter Chi. Why would it be one language that they learn? Because children are able to absorb all of those languages. And even for them to learn various languages, it even helps, the plasticity of the brain. That's why, the UN, UNESCO, all of these organizations talk about the right to mother tongue education, because when you're being taught in an English or in a French or whatever, it actually has deleterious effects in terms of cognitive ability. And look around us, can't we see the impact of that?
So multiple languages in the school system?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. They would also learn how to read and write Medu Neter on top of that. So again, when I speak to people, at least of a certain age set, most people that I know, they speak Chi, they speak Ga, they speak Ewe. If they're in the north, they may speak Dagbangli. They may also speak Hausa. They also may speak a bit of Dagari. And even those languages have a degree of mutual intelligibility. So when people say, what's your L1? That means, in language learning, what I call second language migration, they'll say, what's your L1? The idea from them is that you have your L1, that's your first language, and then after that you have your L2 and your L3. For us as black people, there's L.
You can have multiple.
To the multiple right, power, right?
Yeah, yes,
that's how we operate.
The African Thought Program at Legon, how's that going?
From like I said, what I know now, the students, they tell me that a lot of what I established when I founded that course, the only course that at that time was being taught, Foundations of African Thought, a lot of the things that I was doing. And let me give you some background. When I came here for study abroad, I taught a course called, I studied in a course called African Philosophy. And the instructor started us off, and I had already read Nana Kwame Gyekye, Redu. I mentioned all these texts that I had been reading. He started off the course with Socrates, a course called African Philosophy, Intro to African Philosophy. Then from there, guess who we went to?
Plato.
Of course. After that, guess who we went to?
Socrates.
Well, Socrates was first,
Plato,
and then
Aristotle.
There you go. It's sad that we even know these names in order, right? He went to Hume, Hegel, Kant, so forth and so on. And the reason why I taught Foundations of African Thought in the way that I did is I was like, this is brain dirtying for all of these students.
Not even washing.
No. If it was washing, it would at least be useful. This is brain dirtying. So, I said that when I teach my course, I'm going to teach my course the way that course should have been taught. And that's where I had a book called, Foundations of African Thought, but the main textbook was called Person, Divinity, and Nature. And in it, it showed the commonalities across the continent, across space, time, energy, and matter. And what I mean is it went through, like I said, the so-called creation stories across the length and breadth of the continent, all the way back to classical Kemet as documented and so forth. It went into number, destiny, and divination across the entire continent, where you can see the similarities.
Afa,
Ifa, all of those. And, the Dogon also have a similar divination. You go all throughout, this is a common worldview. it went into, libation, and went into all these things that you find across, from the Amazulu all the way to the Shona speakers, all the way to, like I said, Kemet, to Ethiopia, to everywhere on the continent. And every chapter was made to show you that there is a thread that cuts across all of these different societies that seem disparate, that seem different, that just seem like a hodgepodge of quote-unquote belief systems, that really they're based on scientific knowledge, they're based on a shared reality that everyone can see, whether that is in terms of celestial phenomena, matters dealing with the star, solar phenomena, matters dealing with the sun. All of these things, you'll find it in terms of the architecture, how we build, or structure our societies, how we structure the villages, why the house is pointed directly to the east, so that on the day of the winter solstice, and this is how the house we're in right now is, on the day of the winter solstice, December 21st, there's a shaft of light that goes from here all the way into the room where I do my work, and it illuminates the place where I sit.
I want to be here on that day.
You can come. Now, a lot of people go to occupied Kemet, what they now call Egypt, because at what they call the Temple of Karnak, which was, the original name was Ipet-Sut, there's a pilgrimage where people from throughout the world, mainly non-black people, because they're the ones who know about it, they go there to see that in between these colonnades, the sun shines exactly in between them, multi-ton, right, into the place where the image of Amen would have been located. The same Amen you're saying at the end of your prayers, that's where the image of Amen would have been located at that point in time.
For those who don't know, who is Amen?
So Amen is associated with, like I mentioned, hiddenness, and Amen is called Nut Neteru, Nesut Neteru, which is the ruler of all the energies, the divinities that exist in nature. And the idea is whatever divinity you may mention, Amen, because Amen translates to the hidden one, Amen is hidden inside of that divinity. You understand? Mm-hmm. You say, mine is so great and powerful. Well, Amen is in that one too. Like, how do you beat that? So, that's where, you had this in a place called Waset, what they now call Luxor. You have what was regarded as the biggest spiritual edifice in the world, which is the Temple of Ipet-Sut. The most select of places is what that translates to. And people will wonder, well, how come when I make my prayers in, Christian sanity or whatever, they work? And I was like, well, maybe because you're calling on Amen at the end of your prayer.
It comes and blesses it. Right?
There you go.
What would Marcus Garvey and Kwame Nkrumah make of your classroom if you were to walk into your classroom?
It depends on which class. So I actually wrote an article that compares the ideologies of Nana Marcus Garvey, which was based on black people regardless of location. That's why I called it the Universal Negro Improvement Association, versus those of Nana Kwame Nkrumah. Now, people say Nana Kwame Nkrumah was influenced by Nana Marcus Garvey, but when you read Ghana, his autobiography, he says that he shouted, Africa for the Africans, but no, not the type that Marcus Garvey preached. He said Nana Marcus Garvey was concerned with black nationalism, but the 1945 Pan-African Congress was the rise of African nationalism. And by African, he means anyone who's on the continent, whether it's Arabs like his wife, whether that is, Dutch Boers, like I said, they invited them to the AAPC, whether that's whoever is here, whether that's the Indo-Aryans like Gandhi, everyone can come as long as you're on the continent, right? And that's what we're still suffering from, because if you remember, in 2016, Haiti applied to join the AU, but because the precedent had already been set, they said according to 29.1 of the AU's Constitutive Act, only African countries can be part of the AU.
Which country is more African than Haiti?
Morocco. Now, meanwhile, in that same year, Morocco applied to join and they were accepted. Now, in Morocco, in that same year, there were about 250,000 black people who had been enslaved, and they used the same word for black person and enslaved person, which is abid. And the only discussions were about the treatment of those Arabs in the, what they call Western Sahara. You understand? There was no discussion about how when black people try to get to whatever, Spain or France or whatever, how they get their legs broken, how they're thrown out of second-story windows, how, the women get accosted. Matter of fact, there were some sisters who were here for that same conference. They had the AAPC reunion conference, and they flew on Royal Air Morocco, and they had a stopover. They said that the taxi driver, there was one in the, passenger seat, one in the back. The taxi driver, this Arab, he started reaching in between her legs because he's like, all of you black women who are here, you're all prostitutes. So give me some, so forth. This is a scholar who's coming to a conference.
It didn't matter for him.
But that was, that's the legacy of the AAPC. That's the legacy of the 1945. So I think that would be one thing that would come up, is that for us, And this is why names are so important.
And you refer to them as Nana?
Yeah,
Nana
Nana.
Marcus Garvey.
Yeah,
Nana
because
Kwame Nkrumah.
we call our ancestors by titles. We don't just call them like they're our little brother. So I could say, Ifya is my daughter. I can say whatever. But you refer to anyone who is an ancestor who you hold in esteem, whether they're living or whether they've transitioned, as Nana. That's why I'm Nana Kwame Pebi Date, right here in Ekwape Mampong. So it's basically in so-called academia, people just say, oh, according to Garvey, according to Nkrumah, like it's your little brother. Like, what are you doing?
Classmate.
Exactly. And it's like we've lost, because we went into that setting, we lost that we're supposed to be black people and we're supposed to be acting like black people. Now, to the point that I was making, if you look in our own languages, when we call this land anything, we call it things like Abibimai, where the BB is coming from the word BDA, which is the word for charcoal, which would translate to like the land or nation of black people. If you look at Yoruba, Edu is the word for charcoal, and they call this land Ile, Adu La Wa, the land of those who are black in color. If you look at classical Kemet, because some people say, oh, well, that's a modern thing. Well, Kemet, again, means land of black people. Collectively, we call ourselves Kemetiu. Individuals call themselves, if they're male, Kem. Females call themselves Kemet. You had Asar, right, who the Greeks called Osiris. He was known as Kem-Ur, the great black one. You have Aset, who was known as Kemet, the black female, the black woman. So these are the ideas that we have when we're speaking our own languages. If you look at, for example, Igbo, they say Allah Indisioji, the land of those who have black heads. If you look at the Bambara language, and they speak Jula in Burkina Faso, where I just came from, where they will say Farafin for a black person, Farafina as the land of those who are black. If you go to Senegal, Nitkunyul for singular, Real Nitkunyul, land of those who are black. If you go to Kikongo and Sia Bandombe, land of those who are black. You can go all across, anytime we conceptualize this land,
Black.
from 5,000 years ago all the way up to now, this is the land of black people. But when you use the term African, it doesn't tell you anything. That's how an Arab like Gaddafi can bankroll the AU and say Haiti can't be a part of it because of the constitutive act that says if you're not based on the continent, even if you're an invader to the continent, you can't come in. Only those who happen to be here right now can be a part of it. So, I think just to your original question, if Nana Marcus Garvey attended my class, he would say, yeah, black people regardless of location. If Nana Kwame Nkrumah attended my class, he may say other things because he married an Arab woman. He was trying to be all up with Nasser and so forth and so on. But yet, that's the difference between what the original Pan-Africanism was about, which was about black power for black people. And you can read that in the resolutions that were made at that 1900 conference. Yes, Abibitumi, black power. Meanwhile, if you look at the 1945 Congress and so forth, it's about whoever happens to be here, whether or not they're black. But they were very clear. They talked about a great central Negro state, and they mentioned Congo as a possibility. They were always talking about black people at the birth of Pan-Africanism, but the term Pan-Africanism, one, they tried to get rid of the term altogether by saying all Africanism with the All African People's Conference. It was to show a break that we're not dealing with black people anymore. We're dealing with whoever's on the continent. That was the reason. But because it didn't catch on, they had to go back and hijack Pan-Africanism and say, yeah, we're not talking about black people, we're talking about whoever's here. So now when people say Pan-Africanism, they'll say somebody who's really an all-Africanist, who define themselves as an all-Africanist, they'll say that person is a great Pan-Africanist, when really they were going against what the original mandate and what the original program of Pan-Africanism was all about.
Are you offended if anybody calls you anti-white or racist?
No. But I would think it's not correct because they are not white, right? So at the time in classical Kemet that we called ourselves black people, we never called them white. We called them Amu, which translates to foreigners. These are non-black. We didn't use it for foreigners who were foreign to Kemet, but they were black people. We use the term Nahasyu for people who are phenotypically qualified as black people but didn't self-identify as black people. We use the term Nahasyu. But for those who were foreigners who were not black.
Non-white, non-black.
Non-black. So we never called them white. We had a different concept of even what white is. So what they've done in recent times, really after Bacon's Rebellion and other things like that, they basically decided to mobilize themselves under this new term of calling themselves white. So at the time, again, thousands and thousands of years ago, we can go to Sabi Kem. So Imahu Sabi Kem, he was sent on an expedition to the Sinai for quarrying and mining, that he's calling himself Sabi Kem. This is what they call the Old Kingdom, right? Right from the beginning. You can see that from the very foundation of Kemet, we were calling ourselves black people We were calling, if you go to the pyramid text, also in the so-called Old Kingdom, which I call the first period of Ma'at, we're still calling ourselves, black people. In the pyramid text, they say, you stand in front of the Kemetiu, which is to black people, like the Apis bull, which is a black bull. But we never said, oh, look at the whites, So you can't be anti-white. You can be against these foreigners who are in the land of black people stealing our wealth, who are stealing our gold. And as a matter of fact, for you to be interested in the survival of black people, you need to be against those documented enemies, the past, current, and future enemies of black people who have demonstrated time and again. As a matter of fact, every single time that we do a scientific test to say, are they still our enemies? They'll show you, yes, very clearly, whether that's their role in the Rwanda genocide, whether that's their role in the Herero extermination, the Herero Nama extermination in Namibia, whether that is Leopold in the Congo who killed over 10 million black people, and then even what they did to get black people to enslave ourselves, right? Of saying that if you don't enslave other black people outside of wherever, then we're enslaving you. Like, what kind of deal is that? Well, it's a deal they can enforce because they got cannons and guns, so take it or leave it, you're getting enslaved or somebody else is getting enslaved. Like, this was in the early 1500s, that was a new type of thing. But again, time and again, without any difference, anytime that we give them an opportunity to show who they are in relation to us, they show what all entities, all intelligent living creatures show, is that they're interested in their own ancestry and their own progeny. So if it's zebras, they'll come together in a herd. If it is dolphins, they'll come together in a pod. If it's wolves, they'll come together in a pack. If it is lions, they'll come together in a pride. Every intelligent creature, or social creature on the entire planet Earth does that, including these non-blacks who like to call themselves quote-unquote whites, except for black people who have been trained by these non-black enemies of black people.
So for you, the biggest solution is?
Yeah, so the biggest solution, first we have to correctly identify, and you asked me about the education system. There's no education without knowing who you are and knowing who your enemies are. That's the basis of education. And unfortunately, we as black people, we've been trained not to know either, to the point that I see somebody else and say, oh, that's an area, I don't like that guy. Or that's a guy, I don't like that person, you see? Without knowing that, you know what, we have common ancestry, we have common descent, that is common interest. And every creature on, like I can mention marine iguanas on the Galapagos Islands, as soon as they come out of the egg, nobody has to tell them that there are these racer snakes that try to eat them. Their parents aren't even around. They left the eggs there. As soon as they come into consciousness, they say, whoop, they start running for the ocean. Safety. You understand? You have these, in the Amazon rainforest, you have these tadpoles where, the tree frogs will lay the eggs on a leaf above a body of water so that when either a wasp or a snake or some enemy comes up, they're able to hatch prematurely and then go down into the water. That means black people who have been trained by non-blacks are dumber than iguanas, dumber than tadpoles. Every intelligent creature on the planet Earth knows who they are and they know who their enemies are, unless there's some type of intervention. An example of that would be Yellowstone National Park. My father used to talk about this example, where in the 1920s, they exterminated all the wolves from Yellowstone National Park. And what ended up happening is what was called a trophic cascade. That means a ripple effect due to eating. So when they exterminated all of the wolves, now the elk, these are like big, antelope basically. The elk, they were able to stay in one place and overgraze. And because they overgrazed, now the beavers couldn't get the wood they needed to make dams. And because of that, there started being more erosion. And the creatures that depended on the dams, like the frogs to lay, their eggs and all these other creatures, now they're not able to do that anymore. No. And now because of that, the predators that depended on those creatures, now their population starts to, diminish.
So chaos.
Chaos. So by the 1990s, they decided to go and get another species of wolf from Canada, a slightly larger species of wolf. They introduced it into Yellowstone. And then what ended up happening when the elk first saw those wolves? What do you think?
We embraced them, man.
Exactly. There's an article, and you can look it up. It says, exactly, that's us as black people. Yeah. It says, Yellowstone elk don't budge for wolves. And it shows a picture of these elk who are standing like as far as that door is away from the wolves. And the wolves are like, what? This is the dumbest dinner I've ever had. It's like, this elk must not have been trained by its own people to know who it is and who its enemies are, but that's good for me because that means it's dinner. And that's the same thing that our non-black enemies do. They say, because we trained you, we miseducated you, you don't know who you are, you don't know who your enemies are. And some of you who thought that we were your quote-unquote trading partners, did we invite you to the Berlin Conference?
So know yourself, know your enemies.
Exactly. So if you thought that you had a class analysis, our highest class wasn't invited to the Berlin Conference, so what's really going on. What's going on is what you can actually see and attest to time and time again every single time. And there's a good quote by Nana Khalid Muhammad where he says, anytime if he goes to a Christian country, then the white Christians are on top, the black Christians are on bottom. He said, if it's a Muslim country, then the white Muslims are on top, the black Muslims are on the bottom. If it's a capitalist country, then the white capitalists are the upper class and the black capitalists are the lower class. And he goes through, the whole thing, whatever, religion, whatever economic system, political system, whatever it is, that same thing still pertains. So they're showing you that in Cuba, the upper class is going to be non-black people ruling over the bulk of people who have, black ancestry. That's a socialist. Matter of fact, I have an article that I've been working on to show in the USSR, Cuba, and the US, that across the board, one that's supposed to be capitalist, one that's supposed to be socialist, one that's supposed to be communist, across all of them, it was the same thing. Non-black on top, black on the bottom.
Is there hope that things will equalize?
The hope is in us actually having education to at least be as intelligent as tadpoles, to at least be as intelligent as, iguanas, to at least be as intelligent as every creature. Bees come together in colonies, so do ants, right? I mentioned hyenas, right? Any type of intelligent creature. There's a type of bird called Harris hawks that actually hunt in packs. All of these creatures are at least smart enough to know, I know who I am, and I come together with my own kind, and I know who my enemies are, whether that is as a predator, whether that is, what's referred to as intra-guild predation, where you may have an overlapping territory of wolves and coyotes. So if the wolves can get a chance, they'll kill a coyote. If a coyote gets the upper hand, then it'll try to take the wolves, food if they come in a pack. Same thing with lions and hyenas. If hyenas get a chance, they'll kill a lion. Usually it's when the lion is alone because they otherwise can't deal with it. And then on the other side, if the lions get a chance, they will definitely kill as many hyenas as they can, break their back, snap it backwards. They know who they are and they know who their enemies are. We are the only ones, apart from the elk, who've also been interfered with, who don't know who our enemies are.
You brought down a statue.
Yeah.
The Gandhi statue, University of Ghana. How did that feel?
It felt like a repetition. Like I mentioned, time is a cycle, life is a cycle. That I just wrote a chapter for a book that compares Nana Amani-Renas of classical Kush, her knocking down the statue of Augustus Caesar, cutting the head off, and then putting the head underneath the steps of a shrine so that everybody who comes into that shrine steps on the head of this Augustus Caesar, right? And I said that this is a repetition of the same thing, that once we know who our enemies are, then we don't allow them to exude military power or soft power, which is what the Gandhi statue was all about, in the land of black people, especially someone like Gandhi who said that black people are savages, half heathens, that we live like animals, that we're 1 degree removed from animals, that we're kafirs. Now some people say, oh, well, kafir didn't mean a bad thing. Well, what is savage, heathen, half 1 degree removed from, what are those things? To the point that not even what he said, what he did, he segregated the Durban Post and Telegraph offices. After he started to do his protest, they put him in prison, and he advocated for separate lavatories so he doesn't have to sit his butt on the same seat as the natives, who we call kafirs, heathens, animals, live like animals, 1 degree removed from an animal. So this guy who protested, he said he still protests the dumping down of the kafirs in the Indian section, and about this he feels most strongly. I can quote Gandhi all day long, right? That he didn't want to be around black people in life, so why should he be around black people in death? So we got rid of that statue because, again, Modi's government, and Modi was just here in Ghana, and
Indian Prime Minister.
And India is also responsible for the seat of government, what's now referred to as Jubilee House or Flagstaff House or Jubilee or Flagstaff, everybody knows. It goes back and forth, right? And that was their way. There's a proxy war for this land of black people. India is one of the players. China is one of the players. You can see these, border disputes right there, where you have India coming together with China, that they're always at odds. But what they're doing is, what India is doing is they're putting statues of Gandhi, and then they're also doing Gandhi cultural centers all throughout the continent.
A bit like the Confucius Institutes.
That's what I was about to come to.
Yeah.
So now the Chinese are doing the same thing, soft power. That's what Kung Fu flicks are all about. That's how you can get black people who want to be Chinese and call themselves Wu-Tang Clan, right? That's where you can get a Bruce Leroy who wants to be Chinese, is because of soft power. They know what they're doing, so that now when they come with a deal for your gold or for your bauxite, you're going to sign off because, oh, those are the people who can fly. And we showed a documentary for the film festival we used to do at African Studies. And again, we have the film festival coming up from the 28th to the 30th in collaboration with Unimac and Ozone Cinema at
November.
Oyarifa Mall in November 28th through 30th. That we showed a film called The African Man Who Wanted to Fly about a guy from Gabon named Luc Benza, who he saw those Kung Fu movies and he says, I want to go to China so I can learn how to fly too. So he went to China, he married a Chinese woman, he started practicing, he took part in their Chinese competition, he learned the Chinese language. The Chinese say he's more Chinese than we are. Look at this. That's soft power. That's why a statue is there in the first place. That's why a Confucius Institute is there. And both of those were located at the University of Ghana.
When the statue came down, what replaced it?
So what replaced it, you had Nana Abua, who is the main one who contributed funds to the quadrangle that's there now. So they put up, an image of him. I think it's like a black marble that has him carved in there. Much more beautiful than that, hideous statue of Gandhi. And, there were a lot of apologists. And matter of fact, I had a debate with, Ram, one of these, he's considered to be one of the foremost scholars of Gandhi in India, where he said, by the time Gandhi reached his mid-30s, he abandoned his racism. So I said, I know when Gandhi was born, and I know when he was in his mid-30s. Let's go through the 100 volumes of collected works and just do a PDF search for the word kafir, heathen, savage, animal, and so forth.
And add Gandhi to it.
Yeah, and just go through. So this is what he said when he was 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41. Should I keep going? Right? So he had to, say, all right, he had to backtrack because, you're lying. And the thing is, people who compiled that, they thought that they were doing Gandhi a service. Every single word he spoke. But what they actually did, because Gandhi was intentionally lying, he thought that nobody is going to come across a letter that he wrote in Hindi to his buddy. He thought that nobody is going to read a newspaper in Gujarati that he's writing to his own people in, 1404 or 1410 or whatever. But they translated all of those things into English. And, with AI, you can even translate the whole thing yourself. But they translated that 100-volume series into English. And now any and everyone can download any PDF. And as long as he's there in Umzansi, he's referring to black people as kafirs.
So all the stuff he wrote in the early 20th century is there?
Yeah, it's all there. It's all there. And also the fact that he started lying. So there's another, book that's out there about how he lied about the Peter Marisburg train incident. And he changed the story up to make, to get more sympathy. And, this day there was a guy who was there in the dark and I couldn't see who he was. The next time, I could see very clearly who he was this person. And it's like, Gandhi, if you're gonna make up a story, that was his whole thing. He's intentionally lying about his early life because he thinks, like at that time, nobody thinks that you can get caught up in anything called a PDF because they don't even know what a PDF is. To him, you'd have to pile papers all the way to the ceiling and outside to get across all of the things that he's ever written. You will never be able to do it.
And now we have AI.
And now you have AI. Same thing, if you look at religion, they're lying in the religion. They're saying, Pharaoh, let my people go. They parted the Red Sea and so forth and so on. And they never knew that there was going to be anything called scuba divers or submarines. Or they say, heaven is in the sky on a cloud. They never knew that there were going to be airplanes. Literally, I was just on an airplane from Burkina Faso back here to Ghana. And I didn't crash into any pearly gates. Fortunately, there are no airplane incidents of that. But what they would do is they'll lie in such a way that they think no one will ever catch them in the lie because they don't anticipate the technology will be such that in the future you'll be able to go and find out what actually pertains. So you're never going to find any chariots of any pharaohs in the Red Sea. And what you actually will find out if you actually start reading history and start knowing things instead of believing things is that according to Manetho, as documented by Josephus Flavius, he said that there were these invaders to Kemet who are known as the Hyksos. And after they were driven out, they went on to a place called Judea and founded a place called Jerusalem. So these were invaders to the land of black people. And he talks about how they enslaved black people, how they set places on fire, how they did death and destruction. So that's one text, but then you also have that corroborated by Nana Hatshepsut, who talks about, I've built up what was destroyed for the first time since the Amu, the Hyksos, were in Kemet, destroying what was made. So you have not only later documents, you have contemporary documents at that time that are saying that those so-called Hebrews or Israelites or whatever, those were invaders who decided to rewind the story and say, we were oppressed, let my people go, we were enslaved. No, they came as oppressors and they got defeated by Yamos, whose body you can go and see right now in the museum in Waset. You can go see the body of the one who drove them out, but you're never going to find the body of Moses because he didn't exist.
Another controversy that you were involved in was the Ashima dreadlock students. You publicly supported them.
Yeah.
Did it make sense to you, the whole hair conversation?
I actually knew one of the students who had taken tree with me, years earlier when he was much younger. To say make sense is a very strong word. You can understand because there's only miseducation. Like I said, these people know about Julius Caesar. And like when I teach Intro to African Studies, I'll ask them, how many of you have ever heard of Imhotep? 0 hands. How many of you have ever heard of Albert Einstein? Every hand goes up. I may get, Imhotep, that was a villain in the Mummy movie. I'll like, facepalm. Or I'll say, how many of you have ever heard of Patriotic, the author of the oldest book, what's regarded as the oldest book? Never heard of him. How many of you know Shakespeare? Every hand goes up.
So it's the education system.
It's a miseducation system because there is no education system. I would love it if there was an education system, because if there was an education system, these things that I'm talking about would not pertain. But the fact that they do pertain lets me know that when people are bragging about the Oxford curriculum or the Cambridge curriculum or even the Ghana curriculum that's based on a lot of those things, talking about the benefits of colonization, this is where you can get to a place where those things are happening. People don't know about Nesut Djoser, Sarah Djoser. He is the ruler for which Imhotep built this, step pyramid, right? The first, monumental stone structure as a pyramid that you can find on the planet Earth. They've never heard of him, but if they did an image search, they will find an image of him where you can go to the what they call the Egyptian museum. I call it the Egyptian ancestor prison, because what they do is they imprison our ancestors in those types of places. You'll go and you'll see him having his head covered here, but you'll see the locks right here on both sides. You can see even where they tried to scrape off the black, you can see that his color is exactly like yours, exactly like mine.
So locks are African.
Yeah. Well, you say African, I would say Abi before dia.
Abi before dia.
Connect you.
Black people.
Ila Adulawa.
If it's so. If it's so. When I say repatriation, what does that mean to you?
So I have a service called Repatriate to Ghana, and recently I introduced an initiative called Decade of Our Repatriation that has been endorsed by the Office of the President. Shout out to KOD, Kofi Ochire-Dakon, who is the head of Diaspora Affairs. We have an award that we're giving to President Muhammad. A lot of people don't know that he started the citizenship initiative in the way that it is now, where the year of return was to kind of outdo what he did. So I was one of the 34 who got Ghanaian citizenship back in 2016. So when you say repatriation, it means that you're coming to stay at the place of your real origin.
What was that moment like when you were pronounced Ghanaian citizen?
So I shook hands with President Muhammad at that time. I was wearing my red, black, and green cloth. It felt like perhaps on the plantation when people got their freedom papers, right? You have people who may work for 10 years, 20 years to earn enough that they can pay in order to get quote unquote freedom, whatever that can be in the US. It felt very similar that I had my oath card, I had my biometric data, and it really felt like, a different sense of what freedom actually is. A freedom that you never get when you are in the US, because like I said, whether they admit it or not, every black person in the US, male, female, elder, child, they all know that at any point in time they can be shot with impunity. Every last one, whether they're multimillionaires, whether they're CEOs, whether they have master's degrees, PhD degrees. Look at Henry Louis Gates, who says, we're living in a post-racial society, Obama, and then they kick in the door and arrest him, and he, surprise, surprise, post-racial, Donald Trump is on the way, right? So you're gonna find out exactly what it is. And this is the thing, like,
what did your family feel? How did they receive your Ghanaian citizenship status?
They were supposed to get citizenship in that same year. However, there was a woman who calls herself an ambassador. What I know about ambassadors is that they have terms, where at the end of the term, they're no longer ambassador. But there's a woman here in Ghana who calls herself an ambassador, who has been an ambassador since forever. She's always invited to these events and so forth. And basically it becomes a way that the government doesn't have to interact with diasporans. All they have to do is say, well, we spoke to this woman who's your ambassador, so we're done. So whether what she's doing represents us, which it never does, or represents herself or whatever constituency that she's supposed to have, she's allowed to be ambassador for life across various administrations, whether that's NPP, NDC. Should we pause?
It's okay.
It's fine.
No problem.
We're in the
child.
house.
He's doing his own thing.
He's doing his own.
He's home.
No, y'all. Brah. So, what she did, let me just get to the point of it, is that there were 50 additional people, many of them were associated with Fihankra, and we had all of the forms, and the forms were processed through my Office of African Studies. So we had a series called the Ministry of the Future, where every third Sunday we would meet at African Studies. That started with Founders Day, so September 21st of 2015, we had Founders Day, and the idea came up of, why do we have to wait another year before we can discuss our issues? I said, we don't have to wait another year. I'm faculty here, so I can, assist with a space, and we can do these monthly series where everybody who spoke on Founders Day can go deeper into what it is that they were talking about. Well, lo and behold, one of the, coordinators, Dr. Maulana, he called a friend of his, Nikwesi Kwate, Honorable Nikwesi Kwate, who happened to be the executive secretary to President Mahama. As history would have it, President Mahama was voted out of office on December 7th of that year, of 2016 now. So on December 28th, his last official public act, at least that we know of, was that he said, what I'm doing, I don't deserve any praise or thanks. What I'm doing is an honor for me because I'm restoring what is rightfully yours. I'm restoring your birthright. That is what I felt. What he said was like, this guy, he's not trying to get political points. Nobody knew that he's coming back as president.
Exactly.
Like nobody, like this is somebody who's just speaking honestly from his heart. He's not gonna get whatever, out of it. He's just saying what he really thinks. And, it was just beautiful. My parents, my wife, all of them were supposed to get citizenship, but because this ambassador not only blocked those 50 additional people who were supposed to get citizenship, and we were on the phone with her at the Ministry of Interior, she was like, no, they can't get it, blah, blah, blah. But lo and behold, once it came down that we were going to get citizenship, what she did is she invited all of us to her place, in Accra, and she said, I'm your ambassador. I should lead the delegation to the Ministry of Interior. We're like, but you had nothing to do with it. You never filled the form. You never came to a single meeting, blah, 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 blah. She said, hey, I'm your ambassador. Let me lead the delegation. So we're like, okay, no harm, no foul, let's go. So we go to the Ministry of Interior, and when you go to the Ministry of Interior, there's a door right there, right? So there's the further office, but there's a door right there when you turn right here. And she said, okay, you all hold on. Let me go in first. So she goes in, by herself. And we're like, what is this? We're supposed to do our biometrics, and we're supposed to get our paperwork in. After like a good 15, however long, 20 minutes, she comes out and she says, everything is fine now. Come to find out that she put herself on the list, her best friend on the list, a woman out of Ethiopia who had never even lived in Ghana on the list, her son on the list, all these people. And I didn't even have so much of a problem with her adding all of those people to the list. I had a problem that she's blocking all those others. Exactly. Like people want to get in where they fit in. Okay, fine. And ever since then, I'm just like, this ambassador, and other people, I've shared similar stories that they had elders who came from Tulsa. They brought in all these queen mothers, and they said that, we're going to take care of the queen mothers. We're going to pay for this and pay for that. They ended up stiffing the queen mothers to the head of the Queen Mothers Association had to pay it herself, and she was just like, I just know not to deal with that ambassador for life ever again.
Will there be another ceremony to grant citizenship?
So I spoke with KOD, and what he's told me on a couple of occasions, and he pronounced it publicly at an occasion at ISSER, that he wrote to the president formally that he wants it to happen on 5th of March, the eve of Independence Day, which also happens to be my son's birthday, 6th March, right?
Okay, nice.
So that's what we're looking at. Others, there's been a buzz that, it might happen in December when they're doing the Diaspora Summit. We don't know that for sure, but they've started collecting names. So all of my clients through Repatriate to Ghana, I asked them to submit their names individually. Me, myself, I went to the office and made sure their names were recorded. So I can say for anybody who's interested in citizenship, you can go to r2gh.com. Also, repatriatetoghana.com. They'll take you to the same website. You can do a consultation, sign up as a client. And, I want to make it clear, we're not selling citizenship.
No.
Recently, there was a big debacle of, someone who was saying, if you become a member of this, then I'll give you a citizenship. And then it ended up not happening. It ended up being permanent. It was like a whole, firestorm of, critiques and so forth.
Right.
That what we're doing is we assist people. We have different packages. We can assist them. And if one of the items that they want is assistance with citizenship, of course, we started it at African Studies with this same President Mahama. And that's part of the reason why at the Abibi Tumi conference from the 12th to the 14th, on the 14th, we're giving an award to President Mahama for starting what has now had ripple effects in Benin. Recently, they pronounced Spike Lee as the ambassador for citizenship there. Ciara, apparently some singer, has gotten citizenship. Sierra Leone is doing something similar, Guinea-Bissau. And what I just spoke to a brother in Guinea-Bissau about, he's actually the one who put me on to that history that I told you about, Luanda and so forth, Sifira Baleka. is that we're going to do something along the lines of a citizenship consortium. We've seen how damaging it was when people were saying, "Oh, you can get citizenship in this country," and then it ends up being a law passed that no, you can't. That it ends up, really looking very bad. So those who have a track record of citizenship, like myself, the brother Sifia Baleka out of Guinea-Bissau has a track record of getting people citizenship, not promising them that they could, but actually getting people citizenship. This brother Mansa Fode Mansoura has a track record, Benin, that they have a law on the books for citizenship. They've done various things. So we're looking at bringing together this citizenship consortium of all of those who have successfully gotten citizenship. And part of that is the initiative called Decade of Our Repatriation from 2026 up to 2036, and 2026 will be the first full year of it. That unlike, the year of return, they were talking about 1619, which is really a US-based type of thing. We're looking at historical events that happened in Cuba, that happened in Brazil, that happened in the US, that happened all throughout the Black world in a year that ended in 26, whether that's 1526, a letter from King Alfonso, Nana Alfonso, to the King of Portugal, the San Miguel de Guadalupe rebellion that happened in Spanish Florida. Again, that's long before 1619. We're looking at, revolts that happened, Hispaniola, all of these different things so that people can see that this is a Pan-African initiative in the real sense of what Pan-African means.
Right.
Not anyone who happens to be on the continent, whether they just got here in the year 639 CE like the Arabs, where in their own language they call the land Bilad as-Sudan, the land of blacks.
Ironic.
If they're calling the land of blacks, they're telling you, we're not from here, we're part of the Arab League.
One time. 3 top tips you give to somebody who wants to repatriate, or 3 mistakes they should avoid.
Right. They're actually interrelated. Sometimes you'll go on, non-black platforms, video sharing platforms, which I won't mention by name because we have a BB2Me TV. I want everybody to sign up for a BB2Me. There's an app called bbtumi.com. We have a BB Nkra, which is a messaging app. You can find it on the App and Play Store. That you'll have people say, "Oh, I went to Ghana and such happened to me." I said, let me translate for you. You went to Ghana and you didn't go through repatriatetogghana.com. That has been endorsed, our initiative has been endorsed by the Office of the President. They say, "Oh, Ghana, I got scammed. I had this such and such happen to me. Oh, it's not all of that." I say, again, what happened is you didn't go through repatriatetogghana.com. If you went through repatriatetogghana.com, you wouldn't have those situations. And, I give you an analogy. It's like somebody who goes from the backwaters of wherever, Mississippi or Alabama. Imagine they go to New York City. All the city slickers are like, "This country bumpkin, we're going to take him for a ride," right?
Taking advantage of.
Taking advantage of because they don't know the culture, they don't know, the things that are going on. Similar things here in Ghana, that all throughout the world you have people who may not have a job and they say, if I don't have a 9 to 5, then it means I have to come up on you. Not everybody is like that, but it can happen in Ghana just like it can happen in New York, LA, or anywhere in the world. So these are the people who come across somebody who they met on a white website. That person has no history of helping people get citizenship, land, or anything else. And because of that, now they have all these problems. Whereas if they came through Repatriate to Ghana, so what I would say in terms of the 3 things they should do, they should join repatriatetogghana.com. They should also join repatriatetogghana.com. They should also join repatriatetogghana.com because we are the ones who, ever since we started Repatriate to Ghana, again, we started citizenship in 2016. We started as a formally registered organization in 2018. There have been a lot of copycats who are trying to do similar services. But a lot of these people, they literally just repatriated in 2023. I've been here since 2008. And what I tell people is, the things that I learned in year 5, I didn't know in year 2. The things I learned in year 10, I didn't know in year 5.
It's a process.
Exactly, it's a process. And there are things that I'll learn, but I already know who the best carpenter for you is. I already know the best mason. I know who you should see in the Registrar General's department. Now, I went through a situation where I had given it to somebody on a recommendation. That person took 6 months. I ended up having to say, "I'm going to call the police unless you give me my money back." I got my money back, for the record. But, I had to deal with those people who are not on the up and up. And now I know somebody who now we have a relationship of over 10 years that they'll get the registration done in, a week.
So talk to the right people.
Talk to the right people, and we are the right people. We had the President General of the UNIA, President General Michael Duncan, who was being told he needs to bring $500,000 in to register a business in his own name. And I said, "Well, I can just make you a citizen, and all you'll need is $100 because I just registered one last week." So that sounds good to me.
Yeah,
he just brought a delegation of 22 people to what is now the UNIA, that's not a Marcus Garvey's association.
Yes.
What my great-grandfather was in way back in the Brooklyn chapter of the division of the UNIA, Nana Farao Valor, that he brought them here and let them know that if you need any assistance, and we've had some of the members of the UNIA who we've assisted with architecture, with various other things, with citizenship, we're adding them to the list as well, that now they're able to have a smooth ride and a soft landing because they're coming to the right people. Otherwise, you're coming to somebody, just anybody who says they can help you with citizenship, ask them, when did you repatriate? One simple question.
Good question.
If they say 2024, if they say anything 2020, anything,
watch out.
Watch it and go in a different direction.
So you're also a traditional ruler. You're a Nana. Tell me what your title is and what it involves.
So my title and name is Nana Kwame Pebi Date, right? Nana Kwame Pebi Date, right? And the position is Bemu Chidom Hene. So the ruler of the rear guard, like the last line of defense, right? Of the Bemu, which is the royal mausoleum. So Bemu Chidom Hene. In Equipim, there have been lots of things going on with traditional rulership, but I'm still here as Bemu Chidom Hene. And fulfilling my role, we just did, like I said, rituals here at the Nana Brokwa Dao Shrine. They came to my house. They said, anything we do here, we always want to invite you. So this is what it's about when you're accepted and respected. They see that we've just started doing improvements to the road. Not that that's necessary. It's just that, I'll give an example. There was a land dispute that we had with someone who was born and raised in Ghana, right? Where he had been sold land by somebody who didn't own any land here. And that's actually how I ended up becoming a traditional ruler, because when I was there doing the ritual, normally people are not allowed to be in this space on Fridays and Mondays. You're not allowed to farm, you're not even allowed to come here. But they said, these are the traditional rulers of the area, that if you do these rituals, then you can come here if it's accepted. So I said, okay, no problem. So I went there, and there's a proverb that says, and I know Drew. It translates to, if you advertise or let people know what your illness is, that's how you get your medicine for it. So I let them know this dispute is going on. They said the best thing for you to do is to become part of the families here. And the best way to do that is to become, Bemuchi Domhene. And because I had respect for the culture, for the traditions, they took my side over someone who was born and raised in Ghana, who is, perhaps a pastor who may talk about, all of these traditionalists or whatever they may say. So, these are things, sometimes people get into this mythology of, it's all Ghanaians against all diasporans. Why do they think that? Because the algorithm of these non-Black websites tell them that. So anybody who was heretofore, let's come and repatriate, the algorithm will show them somebody from the continent who's saying the dumbest thing you can imagine. And it's not happenstance that shows up on their feed or their line. That's intentional, right?
And they say, hi.
Exactly.
We told you.
Because the more controversy there is, the more views there are, the more ads that get displayed. The same thing from the other side. You'll have somebody who was born on the continent who the algorithm, I call it algorithm in blues, will show them somebody from the diaspora who's talking about continental people, y'all are all this and y'all are dumb, blah, 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 blah. And who benefits from that? The same ones who benefited from Asante versus Eve. The same ones who benefited from Oyo versus Danhome. The same ones who now, they've just upgraded. Instead of dealing with this, nation versus that nation, they're now saying the entire continent versus everybody in the diaspora. What's going to get you more views than that? What's going to get you more advertisers than that? What's going to get you, 1 million subscribers better than that? That's what it's all about.
How has your life changed as Nana?
Again, the main thing is that you'll find that you are accepted and respected. Like I go around the community, people say, Nana. When we did the Ojura and Ohum festival, when they're giving the Asafo Hene and all of the Asafo Ma, when they're giving them palm wine, I sit in a place where even people who are born and raised here don't sit. But for me to be installed, there had to be rituals that are done.
Can you tell us?
Well, one is that they have to sacrifice a ram. And what that does, amongst other things, is it shows you that something had to lose its life for you to be in the position you're in, so you should take it very seriously. This isn't, and sometimes I'll talk about those who are, and not to downplay it, but you have somebody who's called Nkoswahene or Kosohema, and it just tends to be, that person is the ATM of the community. Bring us money. Now, you don't speak the language, you don't know the culture, just bring us money and you can stay for a seat. If you don't bring us money, away, right? Away, right? And, for me, I never wanted that type of position because I wanted something that's substantive, even something that could be passed on in my lineage as opposed to whoever has money, you can be this, right? So, again, being here, that's where they'll invite you to take part in the rituals at the shrine here, where you have all these people who are born and raised in Mampong, who, because they haven't had that ram sacrificed and the blood sprinkled on their feet, they can't go to that place.
No.
So yeah, I tell people through Repatriate to Ghana, you can get the black print of how you can be accepted and respected when you repatriate to Ghana.
A couple of rapid fire questions before we call it a wrap. What's one piece of knowledge you've acquired that has shaped your time here since you moved to Ghana 17 years ago?
I would say the most important thing is learning the language. Okay. And I tell people that there's a different world between learning the language and not knowing the language. Like sometimes, like I may be on the road and someone say, "Hey, Fihako," something like,
yeah,
and they're telling me, because there's like
something's happening.
Tractor trailer truck or something.
Yeah.
And I'll just reflect. I was like, what if I didn't know what they were saying?
Run you over, man.
Yeah, you understand? Like there are so many instances where people may just assume that I'll speak, Chi or something like that. And I'm like, I would be in trouble if I didn't, know the language. And it makes me think for the people who, I got some people who are like, oh, I've been here 20 years. I don't even know, what is it? Madasi? Mapaucha? I don't even know.
Right? Too long, man.
And it's almost like, a badge of honor that I don't know anything.
The language, yeah.
And it's like, what's the point? You understand? So I would say knowing the language is the key to, again, being accepted and respected when you repatriate.
What's the hardest truth you've learned living here in Ibibiman?
That our people do not have an education that teaches them who they are and who their enemies are.
If you could sit down with Malcolm X today, what would you discuss?
Well, he has a quote where he says that the white man is the enemy. Some of you think that they aren't, but time will tell. Now we see Donald Trump. I don't know if time has told anyone, but some people are deaf mutes and they can't hear anything. Let me say hearing impaired. So they're still not getting the message, even though it's coming through loud and clear on a bullhorn. I don't know what Trump or anybody else is going to tell you apart from what they've told you up to this point. Perhaps people just have to be rounded up in extermination camps, like was done in the very first one between the Herero and the Nama in Namibia. But time will continue to tell those of us who are ready, willing, and able to listen.
Do you worry for your folks who are back in America?
Well, most of my immediate family is right here, so I repatriated both of my parents. My wife is here, my sister is here. All of us drive Kantankas, by the way.
Nice.
My children are here. My extended family, growing up, as I mentioned, we didn't celebrate the horror days. They already knew that we're on a whole...
Horror days.
Yeah, horror days. They already knew that we're on a whole different tip, so there's nothing that we do that would, surprise them that, we're here on the continent. We're building, a palace like this, anything. So yeah, any relatives who want to see me, they know exactly where I am. Since I came here 17 years ago, I've never set foot on U.S. soil, and that was intentional, so.
You have no intention of going back?
Ever. That was my goal when I first repatriated, was to never go back.
So far, you're keeping your promise to yourself.
That's right.
And you drive exclusively Kantanka vehicles.
Exactly.
Made in Ghana.
Made in Ghana.
You get surprised looks?
I get claps, I get ovations, I get people giving me black power fists. Anytime I drive along the road through Mampong, there are young children say Kantanka, and I honk twice.
That's it.
Kantanka, So everywhere I go, imagine giving a lecture about how the black man can do something. Oh, we can run our own affairs and so forth. And then I'm driving.
You pull up in a Lexus.
Pull up in a, They would say, this guy is insane, right? But I'll drive up and people start a conversation. I don't say anything. I say, see, the government needs to purchase these. Why isn't the president driving these? Oh, strong car, strong vehicle. Oh, yeah. They start just automatically. I haven't said a word to them because that's what this conference is all about.
Speaks for you.
Demonstration over conversation.
He's passed on now. What do you think his greatest legacy was?
That's
Nana Safo Kantaka.
Yes.
Did you ever meet him?
Yes.
Okay.
I actually spoke at the Tech Expo a couple of years ago.
What was he like as a person?
He would be like, I'm black and I'm proud, so forth and so on. And he really showed that, we can do our own vehicles, we can do, television, so forth and so on. So it was an enblackening experience, to get a chance to meet him, interact with him. And when I spoke, he gave me a ram and a whole bag of corn and
from his farm,
yeah, from his farm, and a stalk of plantain. So
big ups.
Yeah, big ups.
What song best captures your life story?
There's a song that you can only find on abibitumi.com by Oheneba, and it's called Make Kemet Black Again. In our quote unquote spiritual systems, you have this idea that everybody has an inkrabia, a mission, a destiny. If you can see that the soul, quote unquote, to use that term, of Asante is the golden stool, you could think, well, then everybody may have a collective inkrabia as Black people. And for me, that collective inkrabia, that mission, is for us to make Kemet black again, just as we did for the first good 2,000 years. And I have a book coming out over 700 pages called The Construction of Black Civilization. So you can keep an eye out for that. It's through Africa World Books out of Baltimore. And
2026?
Yeah, most likely.
All right.
I'd like to push for 2025, but realistically.
Keep it realistic.
Yeah, 2026. But yeah. But what it shows is that text after text after text, whether you're looking at the autobiography of Imahu Weni, the so-called prophecy of Imahu Neferti, whether you're talking about the stela of district official Khousobek, whether you're talking about Sanhat, whether you're talking about the two stela of Sawa Kamos, all of them are about maintaining Kemet as the land of Black people, to the point that anytime these non-Blacks come in, we build walls to keep them out. Anytime they're able to invade, we drive them out, like the Hyksos that I mentioned earlier. So, that's really the work, and that's even why we got this 3 acres right in front of Abibitumi, is because there are Lebanese over here who are taking up and gobbling up all the land. Meanwhile, we as Black people are trying to run and shine shoes in France somewhere. Meanwhile, the Chinese are coming. And then people say, well, why are the diasporans coming? Oh, they're doing this, they're doing that. And I asked the question, well, what about the Chinese? Any problem with that? No, they have China Mall, right? What about the Lebanese? Oh, no, they have shawarma, and I like shawarma. And it's like, that is evidence, if there's no other evidence that there is no education system, there's a miseducation system that teaches us to love our enemies, but there's no education system that tells us who we are and who our enemies are.
If Black people could read just one book, what would that one book be?
It would be the book that I have coming out, The Construction of Black Civilization.
Okay.
Check it out.
Nice. The most Ghanaian thing about you is?
The most Ghanaian thing about me is that I know that Ghana was not the original name of the classical civilization that we now refer to. It was referred to as Ouagadougou. So you may say, what's the most Ouagadouian
about you?
Is that, one thing that we have to come to is that we have our own means of defining ourselves. And that's part of, the self-knowledge that I've been alluding to throughout the interview. And what we find is that we used to call the land Ouagadougou, which translates to land of herds. And the idea is that your wealth is measured in herds, whether that's cattle, sheep, so forth. So when you say Ghana, Ghana isn't even the correct pronunciation. In languages, when you see a GH, it's supposed to be pronounced Ghana. And sometimes you'll go to places like occupied Kemet where they still have that sound. They'll be like, oh yeah, I love the Black Stars. You're coming from Ghana. And you realize that because that sound isn't predominant in the languages of the area.
It's still in effort.
Right. They will replace that sound with the sound that they're familiar with, which is Ghana. So I would say the most Ghanaian thing about me is that I know that Ghanaian isn't even the word we're supposed to be using.
If not Ghanaian, it's Ouagadougou.
There we go.
Your definition of freedom is?
So, I don't tend to use the word freedom. I coined my own term, Abibi Fahundie. Abibi Fahundie. When you see these Adinkra that are in the metal work all around, that's an Adinkra that I created called Abibi Fahundie. And what it consists of is Akoben at the top, and the proverb is Akoben Bwana Yuhu Mema. And then at the bottom you have Intinchimye, or Brani Kwanya Intinchimye. That life's path is twists and turns.
Okay,
right?
and the Akoben one?
And the Akoben one is, it's when the war horn sounds that you see the brave people, right? So, I use Abibi Fahundie because, again, if we say that our goal is a term that doesn't even come from our languages, it means that we're going to try to model, like let's say, sovereignty. Well, what is a sovereign? What does that even mean in Latin? What are we trying to aspire to? Okay, what does a sovereign do? Off with his head. Like, what are we even aspiring to? But when we have our own terms, like Abibi Fahundie, one is in our own language, but we can even define what it is where we're not trying to approach a model of what is modern. Okay, I need to wear jeans and a t-shirt. What is civilized? Okay, that means I need to put on a wig that looks like a crantier, and I need to bleach my skin to look like, I don't even know, roasted pig. It's like, what are we really doing? So yeah, that's what I would say to
Break that word down for me. Abibi
Abibi
Fahundia.
Fahundia.
If you to break it down as a linguist,
Right.
what's that?
So the a is a nominalizing element that shows that everything that comes after is combined as one word. So that's the a. And because of vowel harmony, the a is going to become Abibi Fahundia. The bibi, as I mentioned, it comes from the word for charcoal.
Okay.
And in the Songhai language, they talk about Ouagadougou, which is the original name, not Ghana. You had Nyani, which is what people call Mali. That's coming from the Malinke people, but the original name was Nyani. Then you had Gao, which was used for the Sozai language-speaking people. That in their language, they have the same word bibi, and they use it as an adjective, like an all-purpose adjective. So if you want to say that the sun is strong, you would say, Wanye bibi, the black sun. So in Tree, you would say something like, you would use pan or something like that. But they use bibi to say this is a black sun, to say something that's strong. They use the word bibi, referring to the same blackness that you have in Tree, abibi mai, abibi drew, or bibi ni, and so forth. So they still have the same word with the same meaning, but the connotation is much more powerful in that original language of Sozai spoken in what used to be called Gao. They will say something like, I know Hari Bibi, give me the black water. And when they say black water, that means the most pure water, because you have the Niger River. And when the elders would cross the Niger River, they would get to the center portion where no cattle are grazing, the children aren't playing, no one's washing, and that's the purest water that you're ever going to get there. And they will say, I know Hari Bibi, give me the black water. They will refer to soil, if it's fertile, whatever the color looks like, they will say Sadiza Bibi. And Chi will say, Eya Asasibidie, right? To say like a feminine, land, that what they're saying is that this is fertile soil by saying it's black soil. So, all of those things just go to the original point that when we conceptualize reality for ourselves, when we speak our own languages, so that's what the BB is, then you can understand something deeper than freedom, sovereignty, or any other, non-black term. Fa is to take. Hun is body.
Your body.
D has multiple translations, but this one translates to control, to take body control. And the A is a suffix that you have in Asante and other related dialects. That's just like the A to let you know we have a nominal in between these two bookend elements.
So that's what it means for you. And what's next for Ọbádélé Kambon?
Very good. So the next thing is our initiative, that's Ifya, our initiative that has been endorsed by the Office of the President. We have the Abibi Fahundia Film Festival. For those who are interested, go to filmfestival.abibifahundie.org. I'll spell that ABIBIFAHODIE.org. And that's coming up from the 28th through the 30th of November in cooperation with UNIMAC, in cooperation with Ozone Cinema at Oyarefa Mall. After that, we have the virtual conference, which is exclusively online through Abibitumi. Anyone who wants more information can go to abibitumi.com. And then we have the main conference, which is where we're going to unveil this 15-foot mural to President Ibrahim Traoré, where we're going to present an award to President John Dramani Mahama, Archiame Kwame, who's been really big on Made in Ghana, which is what we're all about. Made in Burkina, made in the land of black people. To give him his flowers while he is here. We have Kwame Akutobanfo, who has the Ancestor Project in Nchinchim. That's one of my old capoeira students, and I had some influence in his formative years, he'll tell you. And we have Efo Salah Agye, a world-renowned artist in his own right, one of our former PhD students who's now lecturing at UNIMAC. So we have many speakers. We have those who we have endorsed. Oh, I almost missed a very, very important one in terms of our awardees, Chairman Fred Hampton Jr. So if anyone has ever heard of the Black Power movement and the Black Panthers, you can look up Chairman Fred Hampton Sr., and he was one of those who was assassinated in Chicago. Things haven't changed in Chicago. I was there, I can tell you, right? He was assassinated. They infiltrated, they drugged him, they killed him in his sleep. His wife was there. She was almost, shot up, and his son was in the womb at that time. They said when they went in there and stormed the building, he wasn't dead yet. They shot, pow, pow. He's dead now, right? This is the type of things that we're dealing with in the U.S.
Is that the son who came out of the womb and you're awarding?
So the son who survived, who was in the womb.
The womb is the one who is being awarded.
The one who's being awarded.
Oh, wow.
And we're also awarding his father posthumously.
Yes.
We have other speakers. KOD is going to be our keynote for this year. We always have the most luminary speakers such as Kafui Dey.
Thank you very much, Nana.
KOD. We have Kobe Mensah, who was our second endorsement. KOD endorsed first from the Office of the President. Kobe Mensah endorsed for Ghana Tourism Development Company. Just so many speakers, those who have major projects. At Obosomas, we have a multi-million-dollar project. We've signed an MOU with them as one of the places that people can come and repatriate to. So again, for those who want information on the film festival, filmfestival.abibifahudie.org. For those who want information on the virtual conference and the main conference and the film festival, go to abibitumi.com. You can download the app for Abibitumi as well, ABIBITUMI. And you can also download the messaging, system. A lot of people are like, oh, you don't use WhatsApp. I was like, yes, it's not owned by Black people. I created my own messaging platform, and we have 12,000 members, which is, not bad.
Not bad
the WhatsApp group has 200 people. You're patting yourself on the back.
Yes.
We have 12,000 people, and we're just getting started. So you can download Abibinkra, which is Black messaging, ABIBINKRA. And yeah, check us out. We want you to come if you're based here in Ekwapim Mampong, if you're based in Ekwapim, if you're based in Ghana. This is the third Abibitumi conference and Abibi Fahudie Festival. Wherever you are, we've had people coming from Guadeloupe, from the US, from the UK, from Ghana, from Benin, from Togo, from Burkina Faso, from everywhere you can imagine. Black people coming together on the basis of being Black with the theme, what Black power is, demonstration over conversation, or be about what you say that you're about.
And finally, if you could send a message to the 2007 version of yourself in that courtroom in Chicago, what would your message be?
Come immediately, if not sooner. Like I said, I was working 18 jobs. I was teaching at Northeast Illinois University, Chicago State University, Malcolm X College, DuSable Leadership Academy, Winnie Mandela Intergenerational High School, Alternative High School, Charles Hamilton Houston, Barbara Sizemore, New Concept, did I already say Betty Shabbat? I was doing all of that. On top of that, I was doing domain name registration, website hosting, website design, graphic design. I literally counted everything, and I made a list of the 18 jobs that I had, because I said, and sometimes I would be going from one job and I didn't have time to eat, so I just eat on my lap as I'm driving. But I made it happen, and I didn't have it easy in terms of having to go through what I went through, but the seeds were planted when I was even a child of knowing that we are not, as Nana Malcolm X, Baba Omwale would say, we're not American. If you were an American, you wouldn't catch no hell. He said, we didn't land on Plymouth Rock landed on us. And if you are an intelligent person like he was, then you'll understand that you can wave the US flag, you can be wearing a flag jacket, and you can still get shot. They're not asking for passports, they're not asking for you to sing the national anthem, that as long as you are there in the US, it's gonna be like fish in a barrel. And if you're honest with yourself, you know that. And you'll give a better opportunity for your children than the opportunity that was cut short by, Sandra Bland, by Oscar Grant, by Ahmaud Arbery, and by too many names to even mention.
Nana, thank you. Medasi.
Akpe now.
Akpe. That's our beautiful conversation with Ɔbenfo Ọbádélé Bakari Kambon. He's an academic, he's a traditional ruler, and he is all about repatriation, getting people back home where they belong. If you enjoyed the conversation, let's see you in the comments. My name is Kafui Dey. One love.